Hello, and we are live with Vlogcast number 12, our Game of Thrones Season 7 discussion. And this is going to be just a very laid back, casual discussion of Game of Thrones. And we're all three here, big Game of Thrones fans. And we're going to discuss all things Game of Thrones, including the new season, which starts in 3 days. The upcoming spin-offs, just everything Game of Thrones related. Of course, I'm your old buddy Pizzell, and with me tonight, I've got Eric, Easy E. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing great. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Doing well. And I've got his co-host on Plateau TV, Jay the Stingray. How's it going, Stingray?
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Jay is the heart and soul of Plateau TV, by the way.
Okay. So is he taking... Okay. Well, Orc is the heart and soul of the Sausage Factory.
Absolutely.
So, you know. What are we drinking tonight there, Jay?
This is some donut shop blend as well as some dark magic.
Okay. So you've got a mixture going on there then.
Yeah. I'm usually rocking some sort of a mixture.
Oh, cool. Well, how have you guys been? We've actually not done like a live thing in a while. How have you guys been?
Good. It's been an active late spring, early summer. Lots going on. I've been buried with like Twin Peaks stuff, just enjoying that week to week. But otherwise, I'm living in the dream. Work, kids, family, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Cool. What about you, Stingray?
Same. Kind of disappointed with the movies coming out this year, but other than that, doing well.
Speaking of which, I went. I actually had a birthday yesterday, and I went out and watched Baby Driver, and it was really good.
That's what I've heard.
Nice.
It was really good.
Keep hearing good things about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys should definitely go check it out. Very good. Like I think I expected it to be like some kind of Drive ripoff kind of thing. Then when I heard it was Edgar Wright, I was like, okay, well it might be good. And then it had a really good cast, and the trailer looked really good, and it was really good. It was one of the better movies I've seen in some time.
Oh wow. Okay.
Edgar Wright needed a win. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. It's a very it's a very complex movie from a character point of view and from a storytelling point of view, because I think if you just see the trailer, it's kind of, you'd think it's kind of a silly, quirky kind of action movie, and it's got those elements, but man, when it gets serious and when it gets dark, it gets real serious and real dark. And Jamie Foxx, this is like it's like Jamie Foxx's best performance.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yeah, he's like he's like menacingly, like he's menacing. Jamie Foxx to me is not menacing at all. In this movie, he was menacing. So it's pretty good.
He's definitely an actor who has never rested on his laurels. Like he's kept just over the years, like he just keeps taking on different roles and different characters and doing different things. And I think you gotta appreciate that, because there are some actors that just kind of stay in their comfort zone. And like you say, he's never been a menacing guy. I think I'd agree with that. And so I'm glad to hear he's doing something different.
Jamie Foxx was a comedic actor to begin with.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When I think of
color and stuff.
When I think of Jamie Foxx, I can't help. I don't know what it is, but when I think of Jamie Foxx, the first thing that jumps to mind is that music video from Any Given Sunday where he's like, "I'm Willie Beeman. I keep the girls steaming." Yeah. That's, I don't know why, but he's done so much since then. Won Oscars, been in better movies. But when I think of Jamie Foxx, I think of Willie Beeman in the hot tub with the booty girls. Rapping,
I say steaming Willie Beeman on a weekly basis. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. So I don't know, but really good performance. Actually, for some reason, I was thinking about what's that movie? The Michael Mann movie he was doing with Tom Cruise. Collateral. Yeah, I was thinking about Collateral the other day, and I was like, I need to rewatch that. Yeah, because I remember liking that movie a lot.
Right. So I like Tom Cruise's haircut in that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. And speaking of people who aren't normally menacing, I thought Tom Cruise was pretty menacing in that movie. So
something he doesn't pull off easily, but yeah.
I don't know if it was the gray hair, but yeah, I thought he was pretty menacing. But
he's pretty menacing in Tropic Thunder too, I thought.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, when he was playing one of the Weinsteins, basically, or like both of the Weinsteins in one character, basically.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah. Oh goodness.
Did either of you guys get out to see Spider-Man yet?
I have not. I have not. Baby Driver was the first movie I've seen at the theater since It Comes at Night.
Nice. Yeah, I got out opening weekend to see Spider-Man and very happy. I was impressed.
Yeah, I've actually heard. I gotta say, the trailer didn't do anything for me. And the best thing I heard about that movie is that it's not another origin story. Like, I just did not want to. I don't care what the superhero is. I do not want origin. And I don't. Spider-Man was always my favorite as a kid, but after like Spider-Man 3, and then like the Spider-Man movies that had the other
Andrew
dude
Garfield.
in it, Andrew Garfield, I was just like, I'm out of it. I could care less, and that's carried over into this Spider-Man, even though it's gotten rave reviews.
I mean, hell, we've only been 10 years since Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man, so
Yeah,
I know.
It's fortunate that I would invite you to give it a chance if you get an opportunity to go see it, because I think you will similarly like the approach. It's, obviously he's Spider-Man, but truly totally different characterization. The story's good, and even I just have to say, like, it's just cool to see Spider-Man around other Marvel heroes. When you actually read a Spider-Man comic, sometimes you see Iron Man flying by, sometimes there's like other people, like you'll see like Daredevil like jumping on rooftops. You don't see that here because, oh my god, Daredevil doesn't exist in the movies for some friggin' reason. But that annoyance aside, solid movie, very good, I thought. And all the actors acquit themselves well.
Yeah, I heard Michael Keaton was really good in it.
Yeah, it's that thing that I think Marvel movies are getting better at, where they had a villain problem for such a long time, and now they've just started casting these real titans of acting in the villain roles. So even though the villain roles are not written with that much depth, those actors are good enough to bring something more to them, and Michael Keaton absolutely does that here.
Yeah. He's no Jesse Eisenberg, I'll give him that.
Well, who is other than the Eisenberg himself? So,
oh man.
But anyway, let's dive into Game of Thrones. Let's talk about Thrones. Let's wander down the streets of Westeros, nude, being shamed, having fruit thrown at us. Game of Thrones. And let me say this. Let me be clear about this right up front. I am not somebody who watches television, particularly episodic television. I just do not like television. So when I started hearing about Game of Thrones, it sounded all sword and sorcery and just, not up my alley at all. And I don't remember why I bought the first season on DVD. I guess because it was cheap, probably. I was like, let me give it a shot. It's cheap.
Hard to believe, by the way. I remember it being it's still expensive, so maybe you got a good deal or something.
Well, I mean, it had to be. It must have been. Well, no, I know exactly. I split the charge of it. I split the cost of it.
That's okay. Okay.
Split the cost of it with my girlfriend. We went back to her place and we watched every episode back to back to back, and I was hooked. And the thing that got me, and I think was brilliant on the part of the showrunners, the first thing you encounter in that episode is a White Walker. So I was fascinated. The horror guy in me was fascinated with the White Walkers from there on. And then, of course, I mean, you throw Sean Bean into the picture, Lena Headey into the picture. And, there's the sword and sorcery elements, but I mean, really, there's just such a rich tapestry of characters and backstories and histories, and I don't know. I felt immersed into this world of Game of Thrones, and even though there's dragons and there's witchcraft and there's magic and there's all this sword and sorcery stuff, it felt palpable to me. So I was hooked.
Game of Thrones, to me, took the Ivan Reitman approach to telling its story. And I'm sure you guys are familiar. Ivan Reitman tells the story about Ghostbusters, where you can do any concept, any fantastical concept you want, and if you take your audience along on the journey to show them the way. So Ghostbusters, it's just three graduate students. They're there. They're investigating ghosts. Then they get proton packs. Then they get a whole business. And then by the end of the movie, they're finding a giant marshmallow man. But you're with it. It's like it makes sense, and the audience, there's no suspension of disbelief because it's like you went on the journey with them. You get it. Game of Thrones, similarly, I think, its whole first season, you could almost, honestly, your description, Piz, I think, is almost inaccurate for the first season, because sword, yes, but sorcery, kind of, maybe, sort of. It really feels more like a medieval drama, and then it's that final shot of season 1 where, the naked Emilia Clarke, by the way, also piping up that scene, covered in 3 baby dragons, that like the show kind of leaps forward. And these things that you always heard about, and even characters like, dragons, they're legends. It's, that's not real. Magic's not real. None of these things are real. But we went over the course of the season, and now here at the end, we're kind of faced with the fact, like, well, hold on a second. Actually, no, this is real. Like, what else could be real? And then season 2 just dives in head first with, the whole Lord of Light subplot, and the king's brother, Stannis, and the Red Woman, all that stuff. The smoke monster from Lost makes an appearance. I'm joking, but all I mean to say is that I think it drew people in because there might have been some people like yourself who were like, I don't know, fantasy, sword and sorcerer, I don't know how much I'm into that. But I think the characterization, the actors, the situations, the politics, I'm kind of a political junkie. Like that kind of stuff I found interesting, drew me in. And I won't lie either, dragons are cool, but the way that it drew me in, it was sort of like, by the end of season 1, like, holy crap, man, let's start seeing some dragons burn people. Let's, start casting some spells. And, we're at a point in the show now where all this stuff is fair game. And it's, I think that's how the show won people over, quite frankly.
Mm. Well, yeah, and, I think any fantastical show like that, if it's grounded in, the reality that we all live, because we're all having sex with our sisters, right? No, but if it's grounded in a believable kind of reality, again, you talked about the political climate, you talked about, there's a big family aspect, a family dynamic in the show as well, with the houses and everything. So, there was a lot there to grab onto, maybe if you weren't into fantasy, sword and sorcery, that sort of thing.
Right.
And that was I think it was the White Walkers that pulled me in, but then it was, all the other stuff that really got me hooked. Like when, spoiler alert, Sean Bean or Ned Stark gets decapitated. I thought for sure something would happen to save him. They can't kill him. That was like episode
9.
They can't kill him. He's like the star, right? They can't kill him.
He pretty much drove the plot in every episode up to like episode 8.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And and just about every season too has had that kind of shocker moment. Like I have to, did you watch, Eric? Did you read the books before you watched the series?
No, I didn't. I did it the reverse way. I watched. I think it was between seasons 5 and 6, or maybe 4 and 5. I can't recall, but I watched like seasons 1 through 4 or 5, and then just the season ended, and I thought, gosh, this is agonizing. Like I got to do something to fill my time. And a buddy of mine is the one who actually got me into Game of Thrones. He was the one who, when HBO first announced, hey, we're going to do Game of Thrones, he was like, oh man, like this is great. Like he had read the books beforehand. He's like, dude, you got to watch it. And I like you, Piz, was like, oh, I don't know. This doesn't sound like my, he's like, no, listen, it's all about politics and intrigue and there's dragons and there's like a little dwarf guy, but he's really funny. And I'm like, this does not sound interesting to me in the slightest. So the show is really what drew me in. I don't know that I would have ever picked up the books had it not been for the show, but I'm really glad I did. But yeah, I read pretty much all the books between, like I said, 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, and good stuff. They're definitely good books. And so for a while there in the season that aired, I knew some of the things that would happen, like spoiler alert, Khaleesi in the Colosseum where the dragon shows up. When I was really excited because let's just say book 4 is not good, but book 5 is sort of not good, and then all of a sudden gets really crazy good, and that's one of the things that makes it good. So I was really excited to see that scene come to fruition, and it didn't disappoint. It was really good.
I'm actually glad that I hadn't read any of the books because like the shocker of Ned Stark dying that early on, or even like I even remember I had some friends who had read the books, and them going like, wait till he sees the red wedding, you know what I mean? And but it's kind of like I'm glad I didn't, so that those things were a shock to me because I didn't see the red. I didn't see the red wedding come either, and that was pretty shocking.
That hit me like a Mack truck, man. God.
Oh yeah,
that was really shocking. So I mean, I'm glad I didn't read the books or like look at spoilers or any kind of crap like that because those were like legitimately shocking moments.
I only knew of the concept of the red wedding. I didn't really know exactly what happened. I knew something horrible was going to happen, and so as I was watching, I was kind of approaching it with some dread. And then when it happened, that again, like Jay said, I think the most shocking thing in the whole red wedding is what happens at the beginning. Like, I just couldn't believe, like, the first thing is the guy jumps out and stabs the pregnant woman in the stomach like 50 times. I was like, holy God. That to me was the thing that, and George R.R. Martin, by the way, is always quick to point out, like, hey, I'm pretty horrible. I didn't do that. Like, that's not in the books. The character's that character is not at the red wedding. She's elsewhere, but the show did it a different way.
Well, Stingray, how did you get into the series?
Yeah, I actually haven't been watching that long. I got into it I think before 6 started. A good friend of mine bought the disc for cheap and said, got to check this out. I'd kind of been avoiding it. This, with a lot of things that are popular and there's multiple seasons, I don't know, it's a certain bit of intimidation there that, I don't really want to get invested in something that I have to spend that much time in, just to catching up to current. But it was worth it. And it's a great show.
What was it about this series that grabbed you?
I think it's the actors, really. I'll be honest, because I mean, just imagine if Peter Dinklage wasn't Tyrion,
right?
I mean, you can't imagine anybody else playing that role, and I don't think it would be as good or as memorable if it wasn't him.
Michael J. Anderson could have done it from Twin Peaks.
No,
that's a little shout out for Cameron from Noxious and Anonymous. I know he's watching, and I'm sure he'll get from that. But Peter Dinklage, I had actually been aware of him from Nip Tuck, which was a show that was on FX. And that's a show that definitely went off a cliff at one point, so I stopped watching it. But when he was on it, fantastic actor, incredible actor. And so totally agree. Like, his acting is definitely one of the bright spots of the show. Still is.
Yeah, I had seen him in a lot of stuff before this, and I think this is just, this is like it's really put dwarfs on the map. I'm little people on the map, whatever the correct terminology is. There is as far as they can be legitimate actors, and they're not. You don't have to play the Oompa Loompa.
Right,
something like that. So
yeah,
I think it's really good for them as well.
He was in a really good movie called The Station Agent years before Game of Thrones, and that's a really good movie. If you guys haven't seen that, you should look into it. It's really good.
Right.
But yeah, he's just one. I mean, he's certainly a favorite. You know what I mean? He brings so much to that character.
It's so many memorable characters in the show.
Yeah, so many memorable characters, so many great character arcs in the show. I mean, like I don't want to get too off base here, but like the arc of Jaime Lannister from pushing the little boy out the window to where he is now is pretty breathtaking. I mean, he went from I hate this guy to like I kind of like this guy now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a lot of characters have taken that kind of, they're somewhat questionable at sometimes, their actions, they're likable now, but maybe not, in the future.
Yeah.
Or it's sort of you like them or you like to hate them. The Sandor Clegane, I think, is a character maybe like that. I think people hated him, and then he struck up that odd sort of relationship with Arya where he was like taking her and they're walking around the countryside, and as much as he was threatening to her, you could tell he had kind of an attachment to her, and she had an attachment to him. And then we've since seen he actually is alive and actually still a dick, but like seems to be like a dick for the forces of good now. And so one of the things as we go into this next season, book fans have been kind of dreaming, or there's been something kind of
Clegane Bowl.
Yeah, Clegane Bowl, exactly right. That he will face off with his brother, the Mountain, who's now an undead nightmare walking
the zombie mountain.
And so
bonkers, man.
That's gotta happen. That's gotta happen.
Right.
That's gotta happen. I hope to God that happens.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. And again, I don't know if it's going to, but again, since he seems to have taken on, prodded on by Al Swearingen from Deadwood, he seems to have a new leaf.
Well, I mean, both of them were kind of, the zombie mountain died and was reborn, and the Hound kind of died and was reborn too. So I mean, they're both kind of reborn.
That's
one
true.
of them a horrible zombie monster, the other, the Hound. But let's backtrack for just 1 second. I've not read the books, and this may sound stupid, but I almost feel like I've read the books because I've heard so much from people who have read the books about the books, and I've heard so much comparing and contrasting of the series versus the books that it's almost like I've read them. Like I feel like I know more about the books. Like I've read the Cliff's Notes version of the books. Like I know all about Lady Stoneheart. I was wanting Lady Stoneheart to be there.
Yeah, as was I.
I know all about certain characters that aren't even on the show that like have big deals in the novels. It's weird because there's something about the fans of Game of Thrones. Sometimes you get people who, like with Stephen King, you'll get people who are the book was better. The book was best. With Game of Thrones, it's like, well, the book is one thing that's really, really good, and the series is also something that's really, really good. They differ in a lot of areas, but they're both really, really. It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like they're in the same universe, but like an alternate. I don't know. It's weird. The hardcore fans have like embraced both.
Yeah, I think. Well, because I think the show sort of evolved. The first season of the show is actually pretty true to the first book, and I think there's even a little sprinkle of some of book 2 towards the end of the season. But it obviously can't contain everything, and there are divergences. But season 1 of Game of Thrones and the book are pretty close. Like they are. About as close as you could have a show be to the source material. Season 2 starts to diverge more, but also pretty close. Season 3, similar, and then remember season 3 and 4 are actually they make up kind of the two halves of the third book. But by that point, because some things diverged in the first 2 seasons, you're starting to see more differences. But still pretty close. But once you kind of got past that, like seasons 5 and 6 is really where we start to see a lot of serious divergences and things that are major changes. Like, just for example, the way that Tyrion kind of hooked up with Khaleesi. Like in the books, that hasn't even happened yet. Like you can kind of tell that's where it's leading, but that hasn't happened yet. And just as easily as it sort of happens on the show, you know, you could tell it was just kind of the showrunners for expediency's sake, because they only have, at that point, they only have 10 hours a season to tell the story. You know, they can't have Tyrion Lannister, you know, messing around in the little circus thing that he's in the books for so long. Like, you know, they kind of got to get to the point. But to your point, Piz, is I think the fans have embraced that because the show honored the book so much in the beginning, and it kind of earned their trust. And along the way, when it made creative decisions to diverge, it felt like they had earned that right. Again, I'm speaking for, you know, millions of people, and maybe I'm not qualified, but to me, that's why I sort of respect it. I think that that's why it works.
Okay. Well, I mean, that, you know, yeah, and I agree. But yeah, wasn't it like at the end of season 5 was where they basically ran out of book material?
Yes. So season 6 last year was all, you know, that's why there were some book fans that were all pissed off. I wasn't. I mean, I'm fine with it. It's like, I want to get through the damn story, man. But yeah, there were book fans pissed off because season 6 spoils a lot of things, frankly. There are things, you know, at the end of book 5, you know, we don't know what happened to Khaleesi. It kind of leaves off from that same point where she, you know, the dragon takes her away. And I would note in the book, she's completely naked. The show kept her dress on, which, you know, fuck that noise. But regardless, she's away from Meereen and whatever. And on the show, season 6, we see what happens to her. Similarly, Jon Snow is stabbed a bunch of times, and it's like, you know, seems like he died. And then, you know, the show, we kind of see what happens there. And, you know, the whole battle with Stannis, that stuff was kind of, we were still leading up to it. A lot of things the show has kind of told us sort of what happens. You know, they've made reference to the fact that the book may do it slightly differently, but I mean, I think the broad strokes are probably what the book is going to show.
Well, I'd heard that after, forget what season it was, that Martin sat down with the showrunners and was like, you know, they were about to, you know, go in their own territory, and they were trying to pick his brain, you know, where's things going, and according to what I heard, Martin laid it all out for them. This is how it's going to end. This is where it's going to go. This is what's going to happen, and this is how it's going to end. And so, if I wonder if Martin has changed anything after telling them, you know, if he's gone back on like, well, wait a minute, maybe I should change some things around, or have the showrunners gone, well, let's add our own spin to it, and let's do something different in our own way. And I wonder how knowing how it's going to end has affected both sides,
right,
of the coin.
In seasons 2 or 3, around that time, I think, is when they sat down with him, because it seemed very, I think it was like the reality that they were probably going to like pass him is when he sat down and kind of gave them the broad strokes. And I think they and he have been pretty upfront that he did that in a lot of, basically he told them as much as he knows. But apparently even at the time, he's like, here's where I think things are going to go. Here's how I think this is going to turn out. If, you know, and if he didn't know, he basically said, he's like, this is kind of what I'm shooting towards, but that may not be right. And he did that because I think they asked for it, because they said, you know, we need to start laying some groundwork for some of this stuff. And I think we need to know. And so that was kind of why he did it. But to your point, Piz, like, I don't think he even knew everything. So it's entirely possible that story points we see both last season and the forthcoming seasons are going to happen differently in the books, or may not even happen at all in the books. It may be a different thing entirely. And like you said, just because there are so many different characters, you know, Lady Stoneheart just being one kind of minor example, she impacts the Brienne story and the Jaime Lannister story in the books dramatically. Like, there's a whole thing there that's never happened on the show and won't happen. So those characters are being used differently on the show. So already there, the butterfly effect is amplified.
What I love was when they did the reveal that the Hound was alive, they threw in the character of Lemon Cloak.
Yeah.
And of course, Lemon Cloak is like Lady Stoneheart's like right-hand man or whatever.
Right.
And so, and even the actor who played Lemon Cloak was on Twitter, like talking about, like trying to,
right,
talking about Lady Stoneheart.
Right.
Not talking about Lady Stoneheart, but talking about Lady Stoneheart. So everybody was like, "Oh my God, Lady Stoneheart's here. She's going to happen in this next episode." Blah blah blah. And what they did the next episode, I thought was so funny, was they immediately hung Lemon Cloak, and then the Hound walked over to the creek, the river, where in the books they pull out Lady Stoneheart's body, and he urinates into the water. That tells me that the showrunners are like, it ain't happening. Forget it. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're peeing on your hope. I just thought that was really kind of funny and kind of mean too, really.
Their reasoning for not including Lady Stoneheart, though, I think is somewhat having to do with, I think they've basically said we can't do Lady Stoneheart because the actress who played I'm trying to look up her name, but basically Catelyn played Catelyn Stark. It's sort of like it would be a waste of her as an actress to have her just sort of like through scenes. She can't really talk, and so I think they just kind of decided to do away with that plot, maybe more for actors' vanity or thinking it was too much. I don't know. I'm not sure what I think of the decision. I think the character would have worked, but.
Well, they're doing all these spin-offs. Maybe Lady Stoneheart could be a spin-off. Who knows?
Right.
Who knows? Cole has joined us. Cole, how are you, buddy? Cole, you're muted. Yeah, we can't hear you. Okay. While he's getting everything sorted out, let me say hello to the viewers. We've got Stone Gassman watching tonight. How are you doing, buddy? Cameron from Obnoxious and Anonymous is watching with us tonight. Orc is in the chat trolling as usual. The blue corner is
How about here
now? There you are.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
there he is. The blue corner is watching with us tonight, as well as Joe Perdue. Looks like we've had some incest talk in the chat. A lot of pro incest people in the chat. So
I hear you.
Here we go. My buddy Christopher Wynn commented. He goes, "Hey guys, let's turn this into a Friday the 13th show."
Let's do it.
Let's see. Stone Gassman says, "Hope you had a great birthday." Thank you. I appreciate that. I did.
I think Rory McCann, who plays Sandor Clegane, would make a very imposing Jason Voorhees. So
I think he would. Yes,
he's got a good build for sure.
Yeah.
Does. Well, Cole, I asked. Well, we all talked about how we sort of got into Game of Thrones. I'm going to ask you how you got into it. Did you read the books first, or did you see the series first?
I read the books first. I read Game of Thrones in 2004, and probably didn't think about the sequels until about 2008, when there were rumblings that there was going to be a show. So then I started reading all the ones that are available until the show came out.
Okay.
So yeah, actually, my copy of Game of Thrones was very old. It was my sister's, and I think it's from like a printing from like 2001 or something like that. So it's not one that you really see anymore. It's yellow.
Are there wieners all over it?
No, it's a very simple cover design.
Well, were you not a big fan of the first book? Is that why you sort of put it away in your memory for so long?
I think that's how it was at first, because and now it's funny because I'm a huge fan, is because I didn't really appreciate what Martin was doing at the time, because as somebody that reads a lot of fantasy, I like my fantasy high, and his was more of a mid-range and stuff. His was a lot more subtle and stuff, which I appreciate a lot more now, but at the time I didn't. I didn't like the idea that magic was gone from the world and everything was about people and stuff like that. I want I read fantasy where like there's mages all over the goddamn place and different kinds of elves and dwarves and all that stuff, So at the time I was like, this is way too human focused, and I liked the book. That was a well-written book and stuff, but then I kind of, like I said, I just decided not to read the rest until probably about 3 or 4 years later. There was some buzz. People were saying how there might be a show, and wouldn't that be amazing if they could somehow make that into a show? And I was like, I should read the other. So I talked to my sister, and of course she had read, because she reads everything. If she had read the other book, she said, yeah, it gets really good. You should read them. And I said, okay. So it was probably around 2007, 2008 that I really started to become a fan. I guess so. I mean, yeah, especially reading the third book. I love the third book so much. I think Storm of Swords is just so great.
What was it about the story that kind of that eventually drew you in?
I like one is just like a storytelling technique that lots of people use, and it's been used all over the place for lots of different kinds of stories and I put in some of my own writing too. I always like the idea of setting a story in a world, or even if it's the real world, but making like everything that's going on in a story is basically contingent on some sort of large event or series of events that happened years beforehand. And I just thought he does a really great job of that, because once you get deep enough into it, you realize that everything comes back to basically the time of around Robert's Rebellion, when the Targaryens fell, and what some of these characters were doing then and stuff like that. Like, and how, like, unlike me, because part of me who loves backstory, I just want to overload people with backstory and stuff like that. This is tons of backstory, but it's it's done gradually over a long period of time, and it's inserted here and there. And that was maybe my favorite thing about it. And I mean, it is a really great world and so well thought out and all that stuff. And I mean, he can just write such great characters. I mean, so many writers, or whatever you want to do, if you can create 2 or 3 like classic characters, that's amazing. He might have like created like 25 classic characters, 30 classic characters. They all feel so distinct and different from each other. They all seem to fit in so well and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of things. But yeah, one of my favorite things is I like the past is hanging there in the background, and it's going to come up and it's be important. That's one of my favorite things. And I don't know if there's a story really that does it better than him. Like Star Wars was supposed to be that kind of story, and then when we got into the past, it kind of sucked, right? Like it was better when we could just imagine the Clone Wars and those sorts of things, really.
If you like backstory so much, have you checked out the I forget if it's called like the Encyclopedia, but it was a book kind of written by George R.R. Martin, but mostly by like some of his ghostwriting team. It's like the history of Westeros and kind of the conceit.
Yeah,
have you read that?
I don't own it, but I've gotten my hands on it and flipped through it. That was all I had time for. It's something I would like to buy down the line though, because I like that kind of stuff for sure. Anything that expands on the mythology and gives more in-depth explanations and that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a wiki, obviously, like there are for lots of things. I'm often on that wiki. Well, not often, but I mean lately, because I just reread pretty much all the series again.
Right.
And so lately I've been back on that wiki, like looking up things and stuff like that. It's funny too, because like there's levels to this, and I can talk to people that like the show and stuff like that, but I'm just like, I really want to know what happened at Summerhall, and they're like, what? And you lose them immediately. All I can think is like, as much a big of a fan of the show as I am, it's not really close to what I think the books are. I think it had a great start, but it couldn't be sustained. And I was thinking, wow, you guys are going to regret having me on here, because I'm just going to like complain. But no, I'm not going to complain.
One of the things that, and I think you probably will agree that the books do something, because George R.R. Martin, his whole kind of goal was to sort of deconstruct that kind of stuff, but also he's very interested in like point of view, and that's why each chapter is the point of view of a different character. He likes the idea.
That's something I really like too. Right. Yeah.
He likes the idea of that, like, so how Tyrion sees an event would be fundamentally different than how like Jon Snow would see an event. And so in the books, something the show can't really do, because it doesn't have a perspective. I mean, it's basically, there's a third person narrator, but it's like in the books, like the myth of the fact that Clegane is alive in the show, fans had been theorizing for the books that he was still alive because there were all these rumors. Different people would talk and different people would say like, oh yeah, we saw the Hound or the Hound was here. But when you're reading the book, you never quite knew, is that just people talking? Because you would always get that throughout the chapters. Like lots of people say things and clearly there was a lot of misinformation going around. It's one thing that it's sad the show can't capture, but I don't think it ever could. Just that idea of perspective. Because what I think you'd like about, and I think you've read some of it, the encyclopedia is written from the perspective of it's a person from the Citadel, the old town, like the
maesters,
the maesters, writing a history of Westeros for Tommen, for the new king. And so he's talking about events that we've seen, or rather read, but it's with the perspective of like he knows he's giving this to a Targaryen, so everything is kind of written from the perspective of like we want to make sure not to shit on the Targaryens. So there are things where we know the Targaryens did something terrible, like the Red Wedding is discussed, but it's like, oh, when the brave Targaryens vanquish their foes at the Red, it's something very interesting. Lannisters. I think it's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah. That was one thing. Maybe it's probably been discussed, like, because I haven't followed too much about like interviews and stuff with him. But that's one of the things I always wanted to ask him, and like I said, maybe it's already been answered. Was when he first decided upon that kind of narrative. Each chapter is a point of view chapter, so when you're in it, you don't get anything else. Like, I mean, at first it starts out if you've read the books, there's 9 point of view characters. There's most of the Starks except for Robb and Rickon, the little kid, and then the two non-Starks you get at the beginning are Daenerys and Tyrion.
Right.
And then you get more as you go on, and you get little hints because there's prologues and epilogues. And say the prologue of the second book is a point of view of just a one-shot character for that purposes. He's one of the Night's Watchman guy. He's the guy that keeps the hounds, and he's plotting. I'm sure you remember they're plotting a little thing where they're gonna like just take off because they're afraid and stuff, and that gets interrupted by the attack. And then you get more of these as it goes on. But by the time you're into the 5th book, you suddenly have all these characters like that have to have their own chapters. And I wonder if is that because it just got away from him, or did he just realize from the very beginning would have to eventually go that way? Because at first it's only following a core group of characters, but to a certain point he has to start bringing in more, even if they only have 1 or 2 per the entire book, because it's like, well, that has to be told. And I've always wondered if that was something, like I said, that he knew all along, or if he just was writing and got to a certain point where he's like, I'm going to have to branch out. I can't just stick with these characters. I have to at least give a few.
I wonder, when you're talking about something as expansive and as with such mythology and such backstory and just so much history, how much
Sorry, how much what?
I think Piz froze.
Oh, okay. This is on here. Well, we don't want to have dead air.
The only thing I was going to note while we wait for Piz to catch up here is that it's a good question, Cole. What you were talking about, because I don't know that he's ever answered the question definitively, but one of the things he said is that like he had to kind of create new characters because it's like he knew he needed events to happen in other places. Yeah. So it's like, well, so I've got to have another character because I don't have anybody in Dorne. Mm-hmm. So that's why we got to follow the character of I forget her name now, but she's not in the show. They kind of have her. She's an amalgamation of a few people now, but she's like the daughter of the one dude down in Dorne.
Oh, in the books, I guess it would be Ilya or Ilya.
That's Ilya, I think. Yeah. And I remember people were
Dorne Martell's daughter.
That's exactly right. I think people were pissed off because she's like a really strong female character and she wasn't included in the show. So they were kind of mad she wasn't there. But I think that the characters that replaced her or are kind of, again, sort of an amalgamation of her are just as powerful and just as, they're doing a good job. But again, she's an example of a character like that where he needed to have her be a new point of view character because he needed the events in Dorne to be that someone's perspective needed to indicate what was happening there to kind of cover that aspect of the story.
Okay, I think Piz is working again. Can you try that question again?
Well, yeah. What I was saying was, when you're dealing with material that's this rich, that's such a rich tapestry of characters and backstories and histories and mythologies, how much could he have possibly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Planned in advance, or
Yeah, or how much did he know when he started the first book how it was all going to end, or that he wanted to, have all this huge story? I sometimes think about that with like Stephen King. Like I was
no, he didn't. Just like not to cut you off, finished with that thought is I think he originally envisioned it as 3 books. So
Yep.
Okay.
IO9 did an article on this a while back, and I don't know if it was something George R.R. Martin published or somebody found. I think somebody like stole it or found it like with his original publisher. There was essentially like a writer's Bible or some kind of outline that he had submitted. George R.R. Martin had submitted to his publisher, like, here's what I'm thinking. And it kind of outlines 3 books, and it kind of highlights the primary characters and even indicates some of what happens to them. Some of those things actually have happened in the books, but yeah, clearly he envisioned 3 books, and he envisioned only certain amount of characters. And I think he himself has said that the more he wrote, the more he realized that these characters had more to do, and there were more things that they, there was more detail needed to tell the story right. And that's why 3 books has now become maybe 7. Again, we still haven't even gotten 6 yet, but it's definitely something that's sprawled for sure.
Outline was the word I was trying to find. Was how deep does your outline go? Did he outline this entire universe, or do you get into the story and then the characters just sort of take over and you become the documenting their exploits?
Every author, I guess, every author's a little bit different in how far they go in the outline, I think. And I think as far as any like big sagas that I'm aware of, whenever the writer sort of talks about like scope and stuff like that, it's never, to what I've found, it's never really a case of them saying this is going to be massive and now I have to fill it in. It's always, they think of it as something smaller, and then it just sort of winds up growing as they get into it, is how it usually goes. Because a lot of these things where you look at series that have multiple things, you almost always find out that they had originally planned maybe it would only be 1 book, maybe it would only be 3 books, and it gets bigger.
Well, I always think of something Stephen King said in his book On Writing, and that's great like book. Yeah, great book. Yeah. Like part autobiography, part like how to, where he says something about the point in writing the novel where the characters take over.
Right.
And they are leading you instead of you leading them. And that's when things get really interesting and things get really exciting, and how exciting it is when a character does something that surprises even the author. And I think that's how these big, expansive things kind of happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there are people out there, and, I define myself as a writer, but, I don't mean these people are my peers or anything like that. But, I do have a similar thought process. And all I just mean is I know that a lot of people that are outside of writing, they don't do it. I think might even be a little cynical when they hear something like that. They're like, oh, the writer, the characters are leading you and the characters are surprising you, but you're God, you're controlling it all. But I think it really is a true thing where as characters grow and as you're telling more, because that's what it is, even the author, as you're writing more, you're realizing more about them. Suddenly you realize that they are capable of something that you didn't envision them being capable of when you first, made your first little character sketch on your notes and stuff like that. You're like, originally when I conceived this character, they never would have been capable of pulling off, like, say, this betrayal or something. But now we're here to this point where, like, it's absolutely not just necessary, but it absolutely is organic and fits and stuff like that. And, even in my inconsequential works, to a certain extent, I've experienced something a little similar, where sometimes a character I've just suddenly realized almost sometimes mid-sentence that, like, what I was doing was way off from what I had planned for, but this was how it was. Obviously it was supposed to go. It's like, oh wait, this is how it should go, and you can be surprised. Yeah. I remember that bit where he's talking about, especially, I think he's talking about in The Stand. I think so. He's talking about The Stand specifically, I think, at that point, and I love The Stand, so I love everything he says about that. And he's talking about how much it like broke, like the worst the only time he ever really got truly stuck in a plot in a book was like in The Stand, and he didn't know what to do. And the resolution was the bomb that would kill Nick Andros, my favorite ever Stephen King character, and various other things. Like that was the only thing. Like, and it just like killed him to do it and stuff. But it was the only thing he could think of, like to move the characters on and break them out, because he's like, okay, I have them all here, but now like they don't have any reason to go ahead. It's getting stale, you know, and he comes up with this, and he's just like, oh, but why did it have to be Nick? But it did have to be Nick. And, you know, and I can just totally sympathize with all that. I mean,
I was actually having a conversation with my girlfriend yesterday over dinner. We watched Baby Driver, and one of the, two of the trailers before Baby Driver was It and the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And we were talking about It in the Dark.
Now.
Yeah,
in anticipation, I have to read it again. It's been 10 years.
Yeah,
See,
I haven't.
I bought the book, and like I want to watch it before that movie comes out, and it's again, it's just so big, it's so expansive. I don't know if I can absorb it all before the movie comes out.
Yeah, because it's less than a month now. I don't know that you could. The books are fantastic, though. I do highly recommend it.
Well, and I was explaining.
It's in my top 3.
And I was explaining because like with Game of Thrones, I've not read those books, but I know a lot about what goes on in those books from hearing it from other people. Like in It, I know that there's the ritual of Chud, and there's that It is like not really a clown. He's this entity that just takes on the guise of a clown to scare the kids, because that's how he salts his meat before he eats them. And there's the whole thing with the turtle with the world on its back, and the girl having sex with all the kids after they killed it. And I was explaining all this to my girlfriend, and she was just like, like, that's crazy. She's like, wasn't he on a lot of drugs when he wrote that? And I said, well, yeah. I said, yeah, he was on a lot of drugs when he wrote a lot of that stuff. And she goes,
a lot of his best stuff. So
she goes
from that period, yeah.
And she goes, well, and I'm like, well, he's clean now. He's clean now. And she goes, has he written anything good since? And I was like, I don't know.
I think he has.
Well,
I don't want to turn this into a Stephen King thing, but I definitely think, because even the book Cell, I thought was pretty good. I do think the later Dark Tower books have some problems, but I did like the final book. Like I
still haven't read the final book. All these years.
When he writes on cocaine, it's a lot better than when he writes on Oxycontin.
I liked Dreamcatcher. I liked the novel Dreamcatcher. I didn't like the movie, but I liked the novel Dreamcatcher. And I'm trying to think what I've read of his since then, and I know I've read books from him since then, but I don't remember them being that good. Like I read From a Buick 8. I don't remember a thing about it. I read some of Sale, but I stopped and I never went back to it. I read like The Girl Who Loves Tom Gordon. Didn't really care for that. So she asked me that question, and I was just like, I don't know.
The newest complete book of his I read was Under the Dome, which I liked a lot, except it had often it was like he didn't know how to end it, which seems to happen a lot with his stuff.
Well, yeah. I told her too. I was like, well, he wrote a sequel to The Shining. Has anybody read that or heard? Is it good or bad or indifferent?
I bought it and I haven't read it yet. It's kind of still on my nightstand.
Okay. Yeah, not to turn this into a Stephen King show, but I thought it was interesting. We're talking about Stephen King and It, and I had that conversation. And
my favorite novels of his are It, The Stand, which are two big epic ones, but then non-epic for just Salem's Lot. I love Salem's Lot, so those are my favorites, and they're all from fairly early in his career.
And Salem's Lot also ties pretty heavily into the Dark Tower, which is interesting.
Yep, the Dark Tower does a good job of that stuff, but I mean, Father Callahan mostly. So yeah. But
that movie is like shit, right, guys?
I don't get what they're trying to do. Are they just taking little bits and pieces of all 7 books and just sticking them in one movie?
No, it's supposed to be a completely standalone thing, is what I heard.
So Cole, it, and this is a pretty big spoiler, so like if you want, again, so I'm going to ruin it for you, Piz, but essentially if you remember the way the book ends Cole. Like it's all kind of a big cycle. Like Roland is sort of in a kind of hell where he keeps repeating his life, I guess, till he does it right. And the thing about when it actually did end, he was carrying the Horn of Eld, which was something that in his previous life he was so focused on the tower and kind of not on his friends. He left his friend's horn, the Horn of Eld, is just in the dirt. But this time around, he's got it. Like it was on his belt this time, like when the book sets. And so one of the things that was in the marketing for the movie, and the director has said it's basically a sequel to the stories, he has the horn this time. So conceivably, so it is a sequel to the books, and conceivably it's kind of a new cycle, and maybe things would be different for him this time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not at all interested in it, to tell you the truth. It's not what I want to see. It just looks like they're just taking elements of the books and throwing them into like one 2-hour movie, which is ridiculous.
Seeing Matthew McConaughey in there just really takes me out of it, man.
Yeah, that's not my Man in Black either. Tell you that much.
I mean, I like Idris Elba.
That was good casting.
Yeah, Idris Elba was really good, and I don't know. We'll see. Back to Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of our individual favorite episodes of Game of Thrones. What episodes come to mind for you, Stingray? Like the most shocking, or the ones that stand out the most for you?
Of course, the one you mentioned, where Ned's death. That's a big one. When Rickon was killed, that was a big one. Of course, I think that was in season 6.
When that fucker shot him.
Yeah, by the way, don't worry about spoilers. I haven't watched past, say, the first few episodes of 5, but don't worry because I already know most of the spoilers and I don't give a shit. Because I completely abandoned the show in season 5 because I just hated what they were doing so much. So we can talk more about that later. So don't worry about spoilers. I don't care.
But my biggest one is probably the Red Wedding, like we mentioned before, just because, I don't know, man, I was really attached to Rob, and I really wanted to see Rob do something else. And, of course, Caitlin as well, and the young bride.
I think that's one of the big divides between people that read the book and watched the show, is because if you read the book, it was pretty obvious to you that Rob wasn't important because he was the only Stark besides the little kid that didn't get his own chapters. He never had his own chapters. Everything you saw from Rob was Catelyn's point of view. So his death is not really that surprising or amazing in the books, but in the show, he's like right there. It's like, oh, he's going to pick up where his dad left off, and I mean, it must have shocked the hell out of people.
Oh,
right?
It did. See, I didn't know anything was coming. So.
Like, I'm not saying I wasn't shocked. Like, I mean, it's not like when I read the Red Wedding, I was like, oh, saw that coming. But I was just like, Rob's no big loss. Is kind of how I felt.
I mean, I always like Rob as compared to Jon Snow. Jon Snow, I know he's really pretty, and everybody likes that aspect of him, but I don't really like Jon Snow.
What?
He acts kind of like
Rob over Jon. Wow.
Yeah, Jon Snow is kind of like I don't know. He acts like what he is. He acts, I'm a bastard. Nobody likes me, so I'll walk around, and he's got a chip on his shoulder at all times.
I think he does, but I don't think he does it to be honest, he made the same mistakes that his not father made, in that like he was always trying to be the noble one and make the honorable choices in a not honorable world, and that led to his death, which he had the benefit of being able to overcome that, like many people are not. I don't know, I like Jon Snow.
And he likes to bang wildlings. I mean, come on.
When they're hot,
it was just
red-headed wildlings. Why not?
Well, he's Azor Ahai, so he can do whatever he wants, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Right.
Yeah,
he was working on like the ultimate case of blue balls at the time. Imagine blue balls, but then blue balls at the top of the world.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's got to be bad.
That was practically like self-defense.
Extremely attractive women that are completely nude. Like I think they do a good job of that.
Yeah, they do.
And
very artistic.
I don't know. Very artistic. The wieners too.
Well, Eric, what's some of your favorite episodes?
So what we were talking about, I was trying to think of the episodes, like kind of not. And again, I like the Reigns of Castamere, like the Red Wedding episode, but I was trying to think of some that maybe they don't like stand out, but Hard Home, which I think was in season 5. Basically, the
Yeah,
reason
he
I
is.
like Hardhome, it's because like the final 20 minutes of the episode are John. Yeah, in fact, it is season 5 because it was the season before he got killed. Like John goes up and it's like to save all the wildlings who are kind of like up at that, they're at that place, and there's the big attack by the White Walkers and the Whites. And the reason that episode stands out for me is because I just remember thinking, like, that end fight scene where John is basically facing off with one of the White Walkers, and he manages to kill one. Like, I could bring my wife in here to confirm, like, during that fight when he finally like smashes him and like he explodes, I was like, fuck yeah. Like, I remember just being like really into it. It was just a really cool fight. Because like those guys have just been like killing people and unstoppable, and they still won in that encounter. It was just cool to see like somebody finally do something.
Well, keep in mind, the first person to kill a White Walker on the show was the great Samuel Tarly.
That's true. That is true. They have been that like purely by accident. He
still killed it, man. He still killed it.
Everything he's ever done in his entire life was by accident.
Well, he's got a pretty nice looking wildling woman of his own, you know.
Oh yeah, Gilly's not bad.
Well, let's look at the similarities between him and Jon Snow. Both are down with the wildling chicks.
Yep.
Both have killed a White Walker. Could Samuel Tarly be Azor Ahai? Think about it.
That would be incredible. I think the only other episode worth mentioning was an episode called The Children, and I believe it was the finale of season 4. And the reason I choose that episode is because I remembered thinking at the time, like, it just felt like very cinematic, very epic. Because that was the one where like Tyrion killed his father. That was the one where Arya finally boarded the boat to kind of leave and go to Braavos. And I just kind of found myself thinking, even though I knew it wouldn't happen, that like if HBO decided right now to cancel the show, it just felt like it could be an ending in of itself. Like, obviously there were still a lot of things out there, like dangling threads, but it just felt very much like the show had found a sort of ending, an ending where you could just, in your imagination, be satisfied with where characters could go and end up. So those would be the episodes I'd pick. I'm sure there's others, but
Hardhome definitely stands out to me. That last 20 minutes, that battle is just epic.
Yeah,
epic. And I think it was done absolutely perfectly. I also loved the battle between Jon Snow and what's his name, the flayed people,
Ramsay. Oh, Jesus. Like the whole battle, or just when he beats the shit out of him at the end?
All of the whole thing.
I guess I should have known that was going to happen. I mean, they set Ramsay up to be this awful thing, so obviously
until the Knights of the Vale showed up.
All the way to where, I wanted, like, when the dogs turn on him to be like so much more graphic. Like, I wanted to see the dogs like pulling loops of his entrails out while he screams in agony. You know what I mean? Like, I really wanted that. But like that whole battle, like especially that part where, like, Jon Snow is like clawing his way out from under all these dead bodies. You know what I mean? He's covered in blood. I was just like, oh man. Just epic
for sure.
Awesome stuff.
I also like the meme that came, or not the meme, like the kind of the gif that came out of, like, when John runs out because his brother got shot, and then they start racing at him, and so there's just this lone shot of like John alone with like the army of horses, and he just pulls his sword out. That became like a meme I saw everywhere for a really long time.
But when you saw that, I mean, you assumed he was going on a suicide mission, right? I mean, he was going to be killed.
I didn't. I actually, at that point, I figured they resurrected the guy. I did not think he was going to die. That was probably the one thing about his resurrection that I never quite thought they would kill him again. Like within the same season, I just didn't think they'd do it.
Just get the red lady in there again.
Well, there's a huge like, while they were filming season 7, there was like this huge plot leak that nobody knew if it was real or not. And then like the filming, like the entire season was laid out, and then the filming has pretty much filmed exactly the plot leak. So the potential spoiler is that Jon Snow will die again, and that it'll be the dude who keeps dying and coming back to life with the eye patch.
Oh yeah.
Dondarrion.
He gives him the kiss of life and resurrects him again. And then in the same battle sequence, Jon Snow almost dies again.
That's stupid.
And is rescued by Benjen Cold Hands.
I
like the whole
turn out to be true because this sounds.
But this is exact, and they filmed like what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Jon
Snow is going to prove to everyone in Westeros that the White Walkers are for real. So he puts a team together of him, his redheaded wildling buddy, the Hound, the Brotherhood Without Banners. They go out beyond the wall to capture a White, and while they're in the process of capturing a White, they get besieged by White Walkers. And if you've seen the trailer, that's what's going to happen. So during this siege, and this may be a spoiler alert too, if you notice in the trailer, the only one who's riding away is Jon Snow. Beric Dondarrion is going to die. And I think maybe all of them, with the exception of Jon Snow, is going to die. Well, actually, Jon Snow dies himself. But he's resurrected, and he's about to die yet again. But then Benjen Cold Hands saves him. So that is the... And again, that was in the trailer. So, I mean, that might be a very, somebody close to the series, leaked that, and it looks like that's probably what's going to happen. They're definitely going after a White. There's no doubt about it. They're definitely beyond the wall. There's no doubt about that. And they get besieged by White Walkers. There's no doubt about that either. And a big battle ensues. So, I mean... And the Clegane brothers will be in the same place at the same time in a Coliseum, no less.
Oh, man. It's funny, like all these people, they want to know about dragons and Jon and Daenerys hooking up and all these other things. Honestly, I feel like I'm looking more forward to that idea than I am any like kind of the big mythological things. Mm-hmm. I just think it's been sort of something that the show, it's been like one of the lower level plot things, but I feel like I have so much investment in like the Sandor Clegane character now, and I kind of like his, again, like I said earlier, he's kind of a dick still, but I like that he sort of made a turn sort of for the better. And, to see him face off against, the Mountain would be, I just think it'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. That would definitely be fan service if they did that. I mean, that would be like, that'd be crazy. People would love that. People would love that. And then at the end of it, after the Hound is standing over his dead brother, triumphant, Lady Stoneheart walks out. Minds blown. People just blown away. People blown away. No. But that would be really cool. Also, the spoiler of the leak was that Snow and Dany will hook up and they will do the dirty.
No, that would be stupid.
They will hook up and they will do the dirty.
And then find out they're related.
Jon Snow will have
they are related, right?
Yeah. They are.
They're like cousins?
She would be
his aunt, right? Or is this the same thing that I thought? See, I know a million people thought of it before I did, but just like a lot of people, that's what I thought. Obviously, never confirmed in the books, and this is one thing that makes me upset. I'm just thinking, is J.R. Martin pissed that like one of the big reveals is already out there now before the book even comes out? Because I felt so smart and great about that, even though again I know a million people thought of it before I did, but I felt so smart and great about it. But then finding out that that's what they did on the show kind of annoyed me. I was just like, it kind of just took all the wind out of my sails. So because that was the one thing they didn't do on the show. What am I saying? The one thing. There's a zillion things they did on the show, but the biggest absence on the show that bothers me is Rhaegar. I'm so fascinated by the character of Rhaegar. Everything about Rhaegar is amazing to me, and the fact that, as far as I know, on the show, once or twice Daenerys would say something like, something dragons, and Jorah Mormont would be like, well, your brother Rhaegar, and that was it. No one ever said anything else about Rhaegar ever.
Yeah,
and I think Rhaegar will be one of the miniseries that come out of this, one of the other spinoffs.
Probably.
Oh,
he comes up from time to time, but I mean, to your point, Cole, it's purely as a reference. Like, it's like, hey, he did this, or he was great, or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like it's similar in the books, because I mean, but I mean, that's one of the things where the first time the show annoyed me. And I mean, the first 3 seasons are really great as far as I'm concerned. The first 3 are really great. But even in the second season, she goes to the House of Undying, and she's supposed to see visions. And, like, the thing that has the whole title of the series is pulled out. In the House of the Undying, she's supposed to have a vision of Rhaegar holding Aegon, and him saying to his wife, Ilya, you know, he's the prince that is promised. His is a song of ice and fire. And they completely cut it out of the show. Like, that baffled me. That floored me. I was like, doesn't the whole thing hinge on this? And they don't even do it? Like, that's what it's called, a song of ice and fire, the prince that was promised, the prophecy that everybody's babbling about. And they just completely cut it out. And that was probably maybe the first time the show really, really bothered me, was that moment. Because, like, again, I understand stuff you have to cut out and simplify for the sake of a show, eliminate subplots. But that, I mean, I just don't understand the explanation for that.
Well, Cole, instead of telling us your favorite episodes, tell us about why you tuned out. What was it about the show that made you tune out?
Yeah, I'm interested to know that too.
I hated seeing characters interact that never had anything to do with each other. I hated that Gendry winds up off there with the red woman seducing him, because they eliminated the character of Edric Storm. Edric Storm is gone, so they just make Gendry go out, and he even, like, she's like seducing him and stuff. I didn't like that. I don't like the Hound fighting Brienne. Like, the whole point of Brienne's saga in the 4th book is that she never gets anywhere close to Sansa. It's depressing as hell. She's never remotely close to Sansa, never finds out a goddamn thing. But in the show, it's like, oh, there's Sansa, there's Arya. Like, she sees everything, and I couldn't stand that. But the big sin is probably what they do to Jaime. Jaime is my favorite character, and he does all sorts of reprehensible things in the show that he never does in the books. Like, the one reprehensible thing he does in the show and the book is, yes, he flings Bran off the tower. And in both, he later says, you know, he regrets it. He wish he hadn't done it. But then after that, he doesn't do a bunch of awful douchey things. But in the show, he absolutely does. In the show, they invent some cousin for him that doesn't exist, who absolutely idolize him. And then he just bashes him to death, which is against his character, because Jaime would never harm anybody in his family. Jaime's all about family, and he would never do that. So that's against the core of his character. They have a consensual sex scene between him and Cersei, and he comes back to the city. They turn that into a rape scene, which again is horrifying that he would rape her, because he's not a rapist. So a lot of it is also Jaime. I don't know. I don't know if it's season 5 or 6. They have him like showing up in Dorne with I don't know. He wanted to declare war on Dorne. Like, they just make him do a bunch of really stupid things, and that might be the thing that bothers me the most. I really like Jaime, so I can tell you one of my favorite episodes just because it does the scene really well. It's the episode in season 3 called "Kissed by Fire," where all sorts of different stuff is going on. But it has a scene I really enjoy, where after Brienne and Jaime have been captured and brought back to Harrenhal, and they're prisoners, but they're both being treated a little better. And Jaime, and she's soaking in the tub, and Jaime comes and sits in next to her, because it's the first time on the show you finally get to hear some of his side of the story and start to see him as, you know, a sympathetic character. Because he explains, you know, like how unfair it is, people calling him Kingslayer, and that he's no honor and all this. And he starts saying, you know, like, and he says about all these things. You get a little hint of it a lot earlier on when he's captive, and Catelyn says something about him swearing an oath. And he just says, you know, it's too much. You swear this oath, you swear that oath, defend the king, defend the crown, or defend honor the people. It's like, well, what if the king is evil? What if he wants you to kill your own father? Like, he just says it's all too much. And then there's an expansion of that later on when he tells Ram the circumstances of how he killed Aerys. That, you know, Aerys had completely gone off the edge. She was prepared to burn the entire city to the ground with everybody in it rather than give it up. And that Jaime was even still trying for peace. He said, you know, my father is outside the gates asking to come in. Don't let my father in. And he overrules him. Aerys overrules him. Listen to somebody else. He actually listens to the old bastard, the dumbass
Maester.
Grand Maester Pycelle.
Yeah, that douche. Right.
Yeah, that idiot, right? He listens to him, and what happens? Tyrion forces come into the city and sack the city.
Yeah.
So he should have listened. And then he says, like, the last order he gave me was to bring me my father's head. And the last words he said to me were, burn them all, So I think it's a really great scene because it starts to give, because it's, it's not verbatim from the book, but it's pretty close. It cuts some things out, but it's done really well. And I really like that because I think for a lot of people watching the show, it's the first time you get to see Jaime as, like, again, more of a sympathetic character, somebody you can relate to and realize, well, he's not just like a bad guy doing bad things. It's the position he was put in and stuff.
Right.
So I enjoy that episode for that reason too. I like sort of that turnaround too, how Brienne starts to see him totally differently and how Brienne, really likes him. I like that. I like that that relationship. It's really fun to read about and see in the show is how suddenly she's all turned around on him and she actually respects him and stuff. So that's an episode that I really like. And then a couple episodes later when he saves her in The Bear and the Maiden Fair, it's pretty cool too, because you just see his bravery that he's willing to, jump in and try to stop her. And now he doesn't save her by, stopping the bear. He does it by putting himself at risk, and they can't afford to have him die, so they shoot the bear. But again, that's one thing that's true, and you get out of the book too, is that for all his flaws and stuff like that, and you can say this or that about Jaime, is like he is brave, and he was never afraid to die. And he would always take on anybody, and he would always take them on in a fair one-on-one. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to send his men to go slaughter people and stuff like that. He was always willing to charge in himself and take care of business himself. So, yeah, anyway, that's just Jaime. But I really like him.
Yeah, Jaime's one of my favorite characters, too. And we were talking before you joined about how much I like his arc from where he started, pushing Bran out the window to where he is now. And that whole, his whole relationship with Brienne, I think is really cool. And, he's really turned into, he's really gone from, I hate that guy. I definitely hate that guy too. I like him. He's one of my favorite characters. So,
it's sort of, I don't know that I ever hated Jaime. Again, even though he pushed Bran out the window, it's one of those things that happens when you translate a work like this from, the book to the screen. I just always thought that his relationship with Tyrion, like they seemed like brothers. They seemed like brothers who genuinely cared for one another. And, Jaime seemed to really like Tyrion and kind of, he knew that like their dad would shit on Tyrion and Cersei had no room for him, but like they were really close. And so even when Jaime's like pushing kids out of windows and doing, shitty things, I would always kind of think about the way he and Tyrion interrelated and again, it's just one of those things where the charisma of the actors, their performances bring things out of the material that weren't there otherwise.
Well, that was
for 99% of the roles. I think the casting is brilliant. I'll just say that. So,
yeah.
I really can tell you, like some of these characters, they look like they stepped out of the book. Like somebody like Brienne and stuff like that. And some of them, even the ones that are changed, I think are sort of changed for the better. Like Jorah Mormont. Like he's not really described that way in the book, but I like that actor playing him. Stuff like that.
Ian Glenn or Ian Glenn.
Ian Glenn. Yeah, because there's a few times, and I know it's true, where like characters are supposed to be. Him and Tyrion are the best examples, probably, of characters that are described as kind of ugly that are actually kind of prettied up for the show. I mean, Peter Dinklage is much more handsome, than Tyrion is supposed to be, but that's fine. I don't think it's a huge deal. He still has the whole "everybody hates me because I'm a dwarf" thing going against him anyway.
Yeah. And that's why they didn't fuck his face up. I think they actually said that. They're like, Peter Dinklage is too handsome for us to make
cut his nose off.
I was just thinking, it's too problematic to have him like without a nose. It's like just give him a big scar. Like I didn't mind that either, for sure.
But that was one of the things that
like half his nose is supposed to be gone. Yeah,
right.
That was one of the things that kind of got me warmed up to Jaime in the beginning was how
he was the one
dedicated he was to his brother. Exactly, he was the one guy who was nice to his Tyrion. And you could tell he definitely had some love for Tyrion, and there weren't many other Lannisters that did. So, yeah.
Some of the things that I think Cole mentioned, I can certainly see. I can see the complaint. I also sort of side with the showrunners in that I think they were trying to do narratively some things like find some efficiencies, because again, they only have 10 hours a season. They can't have 1,000 characters. They have to really limit it to the. And I know you. And again, it's one of those things that like.
Well, for that one, they invented a character. They didn't simplify. They invented a character just so Jaime could murder him in cold blood after he'd spent 5 minutes telling Jaime how awesome he thought he was. I mean, God, that bothered me, because I was like Jaime will murder people, but he would never murder a member of his own family. Like it's just completely against the core of his character.
Well,
even though he doesn't even like his father beat it into him that he's a Lannister and he has to stick up for the Lannisters.
The only thing is, though, about that, Cole, is I kind of think, and even the books are leading us this way, I think Jaime's ultimately going to kill Cersei, because I think the whole like prophecy that she's been worrying about her whole life, she's always thought it's going to be Tyrion, and I think it's going to be Jaime. Like, I think that's.
Oh yeah, but I think it's just because he's going to be forced into it. Like, I don't think it's because he's just like, oh, Cersei. Like, I think it's going to be it'll be like literally. It'll be like when he killed Aerys.
Right.
Either kill her or a bunch of innocent people die.
Yeah.
Like
he killed the Mad King. Now he's got to kill the Mad Queen.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if she ever gets to be queen in the books. Don't know. Well, like the queen that they prop her up as by that time, because I know by like season 6 or whatever, I think she's like the undisputed. Now she's running stuff her way. But
well, that's how it ends, and that was one of the things that I thought was a little weird. Like the show, by the end of the 5th book, Cersei's character, like, she hardly registers.
Completely depowered.
Exactly. She hardly registers. Like, she doesn't really talk much. And again, that makes sense given the whole shame walk. I mean, that happens in the book too. Whereas on the show, that's never really felt. Like, she's, shamed and she's, not in a good place for like an episode or two. But it just seemed to me like she just, came right back and started like pulling strings again. And
now that all her kids are dead, man, I really feel like she's on the warpath. Like,
oh yeah,
she has nothing to lose, and she's ready to battle.
Yeah.
I could.
I didn't see it, but like, what is it? She has like the little queen killed, and Tommen kills himself. Like, it's some dark shit. I don't know. I don't think the book's gonna do that. I seriously doubt the book will do that.
That was a really cool. That was a really cool sequence in the show.
The finale. Yeah, it was the finale of this most recent season.
I will watch that stuff. I will. I just had to go back to about a year ago when I was watching season 5, and I just like almost kicked the TV, and I was in I don't know. I was episode 4 or 5 of season 5, and I was just like, no, and I got really mad. But I mean, it's still a really great show, and I'll come back to it. But
yeah, well, she's definitely got some power back for sure. You know what I mean? She's got her zombie mountain and her little warlock minion guy with her, and you know what I mean? She's the queen now. And she's probably sitting on a lot more of that the dragon fire, wildfire, yeah. So
stuff's hardcore.
Very hardcore. Let's talk about some of our favorite characters from the series. I know we've already mentioned Jaime Lannister. We've mentioned Tyrion, of course. Those definitely jump to mind. And these could be you like them because you think they're good, or you like them because they're just low down, dirty scoundrels.
I thought it was bizarre that you guys hadn't mentioned Sansa or Arya yet at all.
Yeah.
Well,
they're not very interesting to me.
They really Sansa.
They have great arcs, though. They have great arcs.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think Sansa is about to get interesting because I think Sansa's got weird stuff going on in her head, and Littlefinger's playing with her, and I can see him trying to turn her against Jon Snow, and then there being drama there. The rumor is that Arya Stark is going to die this season.
Oh, no.
I'd be cool with that.
I think she's my favorite characters.
Oh, wow. No. Again, I guess it's a different perspective. I mean, years ago when I was reading through the books for the first time, sometimes I'd be reading, a really long time. I don't know, I'd be in the tub or something, or I'd be in bed, and it'd be like, you have to get out of the tub, or you have to go to sleep. It's just like, so one of the things I would do to sort of stop myself reading is I'd be reading a chapter, so I'd flip ahead to the end of the chapter to see what the next chapter was, what the character was. And if it was Sansa or Arya, I'd be like, oh, okay. And then I'd be like, I can stop now. Because I had no incentive to keep reading because I was like, oh, one of the boring chapters. Like,
I like the Arya chapters.
I thought some of the Arya stuff was really tedious in the show. And like a lot of it didn't make sense. Like her whole thing with where she was blind and she was in the House of the Faceless Men, none of that really made sense to me. And like, you know, she's got the waif hot on her trail, yet she's going on these just, you know, just sightseeing trips in the city, and like this old woman walks up to her and she's just like, "Hi, old lady, how are you? Oh, you're stabbing me in the gut." You know,
even before that, I was sort of done with Arya. And I'm going to make a really, really weird comparison that people aren't going to know, but okay. So, like, back in the early 70s, when Jack Kirby left Marvel and went to DC, one of the incentives was that DC was just like, you can do anything you want. And one of the things he did was he made this title called Kamandi, the Last Boy. And it was about the last human living in a post-apocalyptic world where all the humans had wiped out and animals had taken over society. And like they were like, you know, like they were like people. They stood on two legs, wore clothes, and talked and stuff like that. And it was sort of like what Jack Kirby was. He was a good artist and he was kind of an idea man, but he wasn't a writer. And all the plots were like kind of like what happens to Arya. Kamandi would go into some place and then he would get captured by, I don't know, the ape men. Then he would like fight his way out, and then he would get captured by the wolves, and then he'd fight his way out, and then he would and all that was Arya. She just kept getting captured and winding up in different places. It's like, okay, she's going to go to the Wall of the Night's Watch. Oh no, they got captured. Okay, now she's at Harrenhal. Okay, so she starts a coup, and they're going to leave. In the book, it's a little. I mean, the show it's a little more straightforward. In the book, Harrenhal changes power twice. When she first arrives there, it's under Lannister control, but then, but eventually, it becomes under control of the powers of the North or Roose Bolton. Like that whole stuff where they've got her again, scenes that never happen and interactions that never happen. They have got her like in the book smarting off to Tyrion Lannister. That never happened. She's never Tyrion Lannister's cupbearer. She's Roose Bolton's cupbearer. But anyway, even from then on, she just sort of kept bounces from place to place. Oh, and now the outlaws have her, but then she got away from the outlaws, and I don't know. I just got really tired of her bouncing around from place to place. There was no stability.
There's a big theory that Arya is already dead, and that it's somebody wearing her face pretending to be Arya, one of the assassins, because
that would suck.
Because of how like little things where
what would be the advantage of impersonating her?
Well, I mean but that's the fan theory, because ever since she's acted differently in the show, ever since that right before the point where she was stabbed by the woman and thrown off the cliff. Like, again, why would you be walking around in public when you know there's a very skilled assassin looking for you? There was a sequence where she's supposedly right-handed, but she's using her left hand. Like the camera's focusing on the fact that she's using her left hand instead of her right hand. The way that she was walking in one sequence was very un-Arya. And they seem to focus on that. Like they're trying to tell you there's something different here. Can you notice it? That's a fan theory. That's probably not for real, but I mean, that's a fan theory. But they did, but I went back and looked, and they kind of do focus on the fact that, okay, Arya's using her left hand in this sequence instead of her right. Oh, she is moving differently here. What? That's odd. Why are they focusing on that? You know, just odd stuff like that. But
I have like 3 seasons of her doing that, though. I mean, what's the purpose?
Well, I mean that it's far fetched. It's far fetched. But I mean, I don't know. It's a far-fetched theory, but there may be a little bit of weight to it. But I did find her whole arc ever since she got into the Faceless Men temple was just kind of tedious, and
that's when I really stopped caring. Like I was always okay, but by the time she got to where was it, Bravos, I was just like just so tedious. The old man saying, "Who are you?" No one. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I liked the Sansa arc where, she started out this real prissy, shallow little girl, and now she's, I think one thing I heard was that they kind of took elements from Lady Stoneheart and they put them in Sansa, and they took other elements from Lady Stoneheart and they put that in Arya. So they're both kind of Lady Stoneheart-ish.
Sort of.
So Lady Stoneheart never showed up in the show?
No.
See, that's awesome. I love that because I hate Catelyn. I was so annoyed that like the one person I hated so much they brought back. And then again, she's a lot worse in the book than in the show. They try to make her a little more forgivable. Like that whole scene in the very first season, remember, goes to say goodbye. In the show, she's just like, go away. And he's just like, I just want to say goodbye to him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
want you to go. And then he leaves, and then he says to Rob, oh yeah, she was very kind. In the book, it's so much worse. In the book, she threatens to call the guards on him.
Yeah.
And then at one point, she's like talking to herself and wringing her hands, saying how like, because, you know, Ned was going to take some of the kids with him to go to King's Land. She's like, I prayed, I didn't want him to go. And she started, you know, she's sort of blaming herself. Like, I prayed that he wouldn't have to go. And John even says, it wasn't your fault. She looks at him and goes, I don't need any of your absolution, bastard. And
yeah,
then
she's a real
after
bitch to John.
Then after he says goodbye and he's in the doorway, he's going to leave anyway. She calls him back. She says, John? John turns and she goes, it should have been you. Like, oh, it's awful. So, I mean, some of that I carried into the show. Like, she's not nearly as bad in the show as that, but I can't separate, right? So, I love that she's not in the show back then. Good. Like, when I read that, I was like, you brought that bitch back to life. I was so...
They very much romanticized the Starks on the show. Because you're right that Catelyn is really harsh in the books. And in the show... while she does some harsh things and she definitely has that attitude about John, it does not come through in the same way as it does in the book.
Well, she even like, doesn't she even tell a story on the show about how she like, when she was first came back, he got sick and she prayed and then she actually got really sad about him and then she prayed that he would live or something.
Yeah.
Like they do that to like make her sound good too. It's just like, oh, but then he got sick and then I was like, oh, I don't really want him to die. But, you know, but yeah, in the show, she's just like cold-hearted as you can imagine.
Mm.
Isn't it weird that they make them older? Well, no, never mind. That's not weird. I was going to say something about age, but that actually lines up.
Back to favorite characters. Who brought up Sansa and Arya?
Me.
Okay. Who are some of your other favorite characters on the show, Stingray?
So many. I don't know. I like I like Cersei. I like Tyrion.
All right. All right. Let's do F, Marry, Kill.
Is he like the most popular character? I'd figure.
I would marry Tyrion.
I think Tyrion was early on everybody's favorite, but I think at this point, you know, the characters have become so.
Does he become extremely like bitter in the show? Because I mean, he basically does in the book. By the time you're on the fifth, by the time you're in the fifth book, like after everything that happened, Tyrion is like he's not really joking around anymore.
Yeah.
He
was very bitter and dark for a while when he was with Jorah and he was taking her to Khaleesi, which again is kind of some stuff that sort of happens in the books and then plays out differently. In the show, it's much more straightforward. Once Tyrion gets to Khaleesi and again they become friends, I would say actually a little too easily. It seemed to me like it was going to be a lot harder in the book, but once they get to that point, he kind of is back to his old self to some extent.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do that in books. Because, yeah, by the time you read the fifth book, like, he's not in the fourth book because of the way things are done. You read the fifth book, it's just like, I don't dislike him, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, like, he's really bitter at this point. You understand why. He's on the run for his life. People think he did all these things he didn't do. And so, like, you get it, but it's just, I mean, it's a big change. Like, he makes jokes still, but they're really dark jokes.
Well, and he's kind of just talking to himself and to new people. Part of the fun of Tyrion was like he was bouncing off people like Varys and Littlefinger and I can't think of any
exactly. His
sword guy. Yeah, now he's just like talking to this whole new cast of characters. Which, by the way, Cole, that actually brings up something that's not in the show at all, and I don't think they're going to bring it in. Tyrion ends up with this whole other character and subplot of it's like another Targaryen descendant that varies.
Yeah, Aegon.
I forget. That's it, Aegon.
Right.
And
Rhaegar's son, Aegon, is actually alive.
Yeah.
Is a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not, at least,
and he would actually
not on the show
he would have the better claim to the throne than Daenerys.
Right.
That's really? Because that's huge. Because, yeah, that's who he winds up with first before he ever meets Jorah.
Right.
And you find out, again, it's like one of those really subtly dropped names that even somebody who pays super attention like me would easily forget. They mentioned, oh, yeah, Rhaegar had this knight who was his friend. John something, and then you immediately forget him. Then you find out that this guy on the river is actually him in exile all along, and he's been raising Aegon. And that's one of the cool things about Varys is like, I mean, everybody knows that Varys is a good planner, but you read the fifth book and you're just like, holy shit! Like Varys's plans go back all the way. Like it's really impressive.
Mhm.
I had no idea they cut Aegon out of the show. That's crazy.
I was
Because
trying
Aegon has a better claim to the throne than Daenerys. He's Rhaegar's son. Rhaegar's son has a better claim than Rhaegar's sister.
Right.
I was actually trying to think of that character's name, the guy like the hired sword that helped Jaime once he got his hand cut off, and that Braun, yes, he was one of my favorite characters in the show.
I love, he's better in the show, honestly. He's okay in the book. Like he does make the odd joke and stuff, but like fair point. He's better in the show, and that's why they use him more. Like for instance, in the book, it's not him that helps Jaime; it's Cyril Payne that helps Jaime, specifically because he can't talk. Because the whole point is he doesn't want people to know that he's training with his left hand.
Right.
That he sucks, and so that's why he uses Cyril Payne. Like in the timeline of this, like Bronn is gone. He's long gone before Jaime gets there and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't mind the change because they're just like Bronn's a good character. Let's use him more. So I can live with some of these changes.
You know what?
I think Bronn is really funny in a lot of these. He's really funny.
You know what's interesting is that he and Lena Headey were once an item for real.
Yeah.
And their split was so bad, apparently they won't share.
Can't have scenes together.
They can't have scenes together.
Which on this show is probably easy to do.
Yeah. But I like him. The time he spent with Tyrion was really funny, and of course when he was helping Jaime Lannister was really funny. I like him a lot. You mentioned Varys. I like him a lot.
And again, Varys and Littlefinger, like. Amazing casting. Like you read the books, like I read the books years before there was a show. I mean, these guys are better than what was in my head. Like,
yeah.
Littlefinger's a great bad guy. Even the guy who played Joffrey, like I hated that character so much, but I mean, a lot of that was the actor. I mean, you've got to give it to the actor who played him. He did a good job. You were supposed to hate him, and I mean, you really hated him. So. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever hated a character more than I hated Joffrey.
Oh yeah.
I think I hated whatchamacallit, the Flang guy. I think I hated him.
Ramsay Bolton.
Well, see,
I hate Catelyn more than anybody, and she never did anything nearly as bad as those guys.
That was great casting too. That's a really good actor who's been in a lot of things, but you wouldn't like know him by name. And he did an excellent job with that role because you were supposed to hate him too. But at the same time, I don't know. I almost found him humorous, like when he cut off what's his name's wang, and he was like eating that sausage in front of him, and like, oh, by the way, I just cut off your wang. This sausage is so good. He was great at being despicable. You know what I mean? So.
He's sort of funny the way the Joker's funny. Like the Joker is doing horrible things. He's killing people. Yeah. He's really depraved, but he is kind of funny, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, he made good.
And again, he's funnier on the show. He's not funny in the book. Trust me. He's just. And I think that's one of the things that they probably thought was a good idea for the show. It makes him a little easier to take, as he has that little. I mean, you could say that makes it worse. He's even more sadistic, but for some reason it is easier to take, that he can throw in a joke here and there. Yeah, he's not making any jokes in the show, and he's actually a lot more calm and cool and collected. In the book, he'll like fly into a rage if you do you're on eggshells the whole time around him.
Yeah, and it should be noted too that in the books, while he still does the same things to Theon, it's much more subtext. Like the show makes it explicit, like what is about to happen in that scene.
His dick is gone,
yeah. Whereas in the book, it's never really explicitly said. I mean, again, you sort of figure it out.
Perspective difference again, right?
Yeah.
Is that the book doesn't like there. What's funny is if you read the books, Theon disappears. Theon doesn't have any chapters of his own.
Yep.
In the first book. In the second book, he's one of the characters that gets his own chapters. Then he completely disappears until the fifth book. So this was one of the big things that they had to move along the most in the show. And then I noticed right off, like very early in the show, you're still in the third season of the show, and they're showing all this stuff with him and Ramsay Bolton. Whereas if you had read the books, you had to wait a super long time to have any idea what happened with Theon. Like it just cuts off. Like you don't really.
He will be known as Reek from this point on.
Yeah. At the point, like you're reading stuff and people are talking about how he's probably dead or this happened or that happened, but you don't know. The show has to come in and show us this. The show can't have the big gaps that the books do. They can't have characters disappear for episode after episode after episode, which is fine. I respect it.
Right.
So, So you get all the stuff about him being tortured and stuff. It's all past tense. It's just Theon remembering that this happened. There's no scene in the here and now with him up on the rack and Ramsay Bolton there making jokes.
Yeah,
like that's a disadvantage and an advantage of the show. Sometimes it's an advantage because you get like a deeper insight to some of these characters on the show. Like one of the scenes I really like in the very first season, and could never possibly happen in the book because of the perspectives, is you get a scene between Robert and Cersei. Remember, where they just have that really honest scene where they finally just sort of lay their cards on the table, and she's just like, was there ever a chance for us and stuff like that, and they're like, that's not in the book, but I really appreciate it in the show. It's a nice little insight into two characters who at the time were more side characters, and we get to see some sort of insight into their personalities and how they view their situation. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff that's like a lot more subtle. Like I don't know how to. There's different ways to view the whole stuff about the portrayal of, say, like gay characters. On the one hand, you can say, oh, it's really good that they've got they're not afraid to have some gay characters and even show like some gay sex, I guess, stuff like that. Whereas in the book, it's never stated. It's infinitesimally hinted, like so barely anything about the whole thing between Renly and Loras. It's pretty much, you can only make guesses. There's nothing in there. But part of me thinks, isn't it kind of exploitative too? It just feels like it was more exploitative because they took Loras and almost just turned him into a gay stereotype, is how I felt. Like Loras, the Knight of Flowers, this really good knight. He's only 16 or 17, but he's super gifted and he's actually is really brave and all this stuff. But then they're just like, he's fucking Renly. Isn't that kind of funny? I don't know. I almost feel, I don't like how they handled the show. I felt it was exploited.
I thought it was just more of a show don't tell kind of thing. Like, you can only be so subtextual. I think in that case, they couldn't, since it was sort of a plot point and some of the stuff going on, I think they had to kind of show it. Point,
and they had characters joking about it and stuff like that. And I don't know. I didn't like it. Yeah.
Hold on a second, Cole. Jerp Penn comments, he wants to know, why is Cole so smart? Cole, fill him in. Why are you so smart?
You guys are just dumb. It makes me look smart by comparison.
There you go. There's the answer.
And I read a lot of the books.
Well, and that reminded me of the character of the Dornish guy who was fighting for Tyrion and died to the Mountain, actually killed the Mountain. That was a super shocking episode when the Mountain poked his eyes out and crushed his skull, and it was, oh my God, just totally
one of the more disturbing scenes on the show to me.
One of probably the most disturbing sequence on the show. That was like,
and that one they didn't dress up. That's just like in the book. Like they didn't add or take away. Like that just Oberyn, and that shocked me too. Right? Like Oberyn Martell, because you're just like, oh, he's kicking the shit out of him. This is awesome, and then he makes this fatal mistake. And
I thought too that they really his face right on and stuff. I thought they were playing up the bit about where it's very much like Princess Bride. I thought that the show was playing that up, but when you read the book, he does that. He does the whole
he keeps saying it over and over again. And in the Princess Bride, the book, than in the movie. If you guys saw the Princess Bride, the movie, he says it 4 or 5 times. In the book, he says it about 25, 26 times. I'm not kidding. It goes on in the book.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. Eric, Cole, favorite characters from the series, the books?
Quicker. Yeah, because like I said, I think there's a lot of even like more minor characters that I just really respect. I like Loras Tyrell. I think he's really cool, and he's probably dead. I don't know if he's gonna die, but I liked him. But anyway, sort of the flip side of Jaime's, I like Jaime because he turns out to be really complex. I like one character for being kind of really simple, and that's Davos. I really like Davos because he just tries to do the right thing. And he also kind of has like this huge inferiority complex about himself that I can kind of relate to. Like, you see more of it again in the book than the show, but you see in the book show too, but he'll often say like he just feels like so uncomfortable with like how Stannis has raised him up. Because he was a smuggler, he was a criminal, and then he got knighted, and then he even became Stannis's hand. And all he really wanted to do, like, they seem to eliminate some of his sons in the books, in the show. In the books, he has like 7 sons, and 4 of them die in that Battle of the Blackwater. In this one, they seem to he only has 1 or 2 sons. But anyway, And you get a sense like all he really wants to do is go back home to his wife and like have his sons grow up and stuff. But he's just trying to do what he can for what's right. I don't know. I really like Davos just for being simple. He's not complex. He doesn't really change as the books go or the book or the shows go on. He just kind of stays the same. But I don't know. You just really respect him. And you feel like he's just a good man.
He's one of the more likable characters because he doesn't really have anything that he's done, negative in his actions.
Right. And as much as he loves
selfless.
And as much as he loves Stannis and wants and thinks Stannis should be on the throne, is loyal to him, he would stand up to Stannis and tell him when he thought he was wrong. He even got thrown in jail for it before, And in the show he lets Gendry go free. In the book it's Edric Storm, but again he does something that's considered a big crime because he's just thinking, Stannis, I don't want you to be a murderer. I don't want you to have innocent blood on your hands, and if you have to kill me for that, that's okay. So yeah, I really like Davos for reasons like that. Like he's just sort of a really moral guy. He admits that he's not as wise as some people or as great or this, but he just sort of has this worldview and he sticks to it, and I really like him for that. Again, really good casting. Really like the guy playing him.
Yeah.
I won't. Well, I was going to mention Davos. I very much like Liam. I think it's Cunningham who plays him. I just like that sort of Scottish brogue that he has. Like I could listen to that guy talk about anything. But I won't. So I won't double on that. I very much like. We were talking about him before. Ian Glenn's character. The Jorah Mormont. And I think it's similarly sort of a thing that attracts me to his character that I'm attracted to Davos, which is that like now in Jorah's case, like he was like kind of that knight character now, but he had a fall. But he kind of approaches the world with a sort of humility that not many of the characters do. And it's also a testament to like he has a fantastic accent as well. I could listen to him talk about anything. But it's just whenever he does things and like he really is, with a lot of characters, even Tyrion at some moments, you weren't always sure what angles he was playing. In Jorah's case, even though he was actually betraying Khaleesi in like season 1, after that point you really get the sense like this guy is all in, like he is fully committed to her, and he's not running a game. And there was something about that simplicity of like he is with her, he fully believes in the promise that she brings that I liked. Other than that, I think I'd probably say Littlefinger, and again it's a testament to just the performance and the actor. I've liked that actor ever since The Wire. But it's, it is like, especially after reading the books too, I agree with you, Cole. And again, my perspective is flipped. I saw him before I read the books, but I don't know anyone else who could have played that role and done it justice. Like, I don't know who could have done it. Like he really is picture perfect for it.
Yeah. He has it's a show full of really good quotes and stuff, and he has just some of the best lines and the way he says them. I like it when in the early season, even where like he even manages like to sort of like, Ned is supposed to be so great and everything like that, and he even manages to like lock Ned into like a corner with his logic, where he's telling him what he should do and how he could save this, and he's like, the people that attacked my family, he's like, you expect me to make peace with my enemies? He's like, we can only make peace with our enemies. That's why it's called making peace. And it's just like, oh, checkmate, Ned Stark.
Right. Right.
But he's got all sorts of really great lines and stuff.
He's also in one of the most infamous scenes of sexposition that the show has, where he's basically like got this big long monologue about his grand plans and what he's going to do while two of his prostitutes are like each other on the couch.
He's just like, I can't win by, and it's kind of clever because it helps give backstory.
Yeah.
Where, the book it's just there, and this they have to like find a way to have some backstory. So this is he tells the story about how like he wanted to be with Catelyn and he fought for her hand against Ned's brother, and how he's like, but that's not a story, life's not a story, and like he beat the shit out of me and he wouldn't even kill me. He's just like, I realize I won't win their way, but I can win my way. And he's like, I'm gonna fuck them. That's really great. Like that's not in the book, but it's a really good understanding of the character from the book and adapted over. It's really great.
And it's a testament to his performance that he actually is drawing your attention, in a scene
With two women.
in that particular scene. Like, I am paying attention to him, not really the other thing.
Although I have to say, speaking of invented characters, what was up with that? The one that they make his right-hand man, that invented prostitute. They just loved her. Yeah, Roz.
Yeah.
They, out of thin air, they just make this prostitute who's fucking Theon, again, for the purposes of backstory. It's so that we get a little backstory about Theon. It's so why we know who he is, that he's not a Stark, and that blah, blah, blah. Because he's railing her while he's telling her about it, saying, you know, oh, I'm from the Iron Islands, and blah, blah, blah. And you find out, okay, that he's a ward here because he's a hostage, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they just loved her in the first season. They just made up this, like, red-haired hooker with a heart of gold, and then they have, like, Joffrey kill her, I think.
I think that is what happened to her. I actually think that she was probably born out of some insecurity on the part of the showrunners. Like, I think that because the way they then got rid of her, and the show has been, you know, again, I think we differ in our opinion on this somewhat, but I've loved the show since she's been gone for the most part. I think they've had some really strong material, but I think they felt they needed a conduit for characters to do some of these things, and I'm not sure that's true. But I think they kind of leaned on her to do some narrative lifting for them when they were still kind of learning the ropes of how to make a show. Because remember, this is their first show. Like, the two guys running this, like, they'd never run a show before. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know that they'd even written for Hollywood before. I don't know how the hell they got the job.
The one guy, David Benioff, he wrote The 25th Hour, the novel, and the screenplay.
Okay.
I hate that movie. I love it. That's like one of the only Ed Norton movies I can.
He wrote a couple of other. Oh, he wrote the movie Stay with Brian Gosling in it.
I don't remember.
I don't remember it very much either. He's written novels and movies, so
yeah. So
right,
still very impressive.
Right. And by the way, not a knock on them. I'm just saying, if anything, I'm saying I think they probably could have done just as well without Roz, but I think they leaned on her because they weren't sure how to get certain elements of the story out.
I'm not saying I mind that she existed. I'm saying I'm kind of amused by it. That like,
well, I mean, they
just invent this character and like they give her own little story arc. It's like I'm just sort of amused by it, and in the end, they kill her off anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So
well, they had to get to the point where Theon tells the audience who he is, and what better way to do that than for him to tell the audience who he is than by doing it while performing coitus upon a woman. So smart on their parts, actually.
I know, but then she's part of like the whole entourage, even though she's not. She goes separately, but everyone goes to King's Landing. She goes to King's Landing. Everybody sets themselves up in a new position. She sets herself up in a new position and stuff. Yeah, it's just sort of funny. She's like the right hand man to Littlefinger and running the brothels and stuff. I don't know. I just got a kick out of it. It's kind of funny.
Well, let's do some fan theory of our own, just for the series, not necessarily for the books. How do you see the series ending? How do you want the series to end? Because I think we're at this point where we know that Jon Snow is the son of, R plus L equal J. We know that. He's died. He's come back to life. He's following all these footsteps toward being Azor Ahai. Will they throw a curveball at us? Is he going to sit on the Game of Thrones? I mean, is he going to sit on the Iron Throne? Is Daenerys going to sit on the Iron Throne? Though it seems like the deck is sort of stacked in her favor, which seems almost too obvious. Are they both going to sit? Are they going to rule together on the throne? That almost seems too obvious. How do you see it all turning out in the end? Let me start with you, Eric.
I think I'm sort of with you in that. It really seems like Daenerys has so much like momentum behind her, and she's got dragons, and she's got like all of these hard-won people. Like, again, she, if anything, even though she's like setting herself up as a queen, there's kind of a very like democratic movement type of thing moving with her. That if you follow me, you can be free men. That kind of thing, like breaking slave chains and whatnot. But I just feel like, it's almost too easy. Like, if she were to do it, it would be satisfying. But the show hasn't always given us satisfying. It's given us more of a realistic take. So like I could see maybe her doing it, but like at such great cost, like everyone around her is dead. Or I could see her not actually doing it, and somehow it ends up being John, but like everyone around him is dead. I mean, hell, I think there's a case to be made that it really does get to be Littlefinger somehow. I'll be honest, I actually think I would be satisfied with that if somehow Littlefinger managed to pull it out. Because I think that would be sort of unexpected.
Between the show and
would do it.
He's basically depicted as the most competent character.
Yeah.
Like everybody has had their moments where they've done something really great or they've planned something or carried it off, but everybody's had their setbacks too. Littlefinger's had like 0 setbacks. Everything changes. He just sort of adapts to it.
Yeah, so. He kind of he's playing the long game in a lot of ways. So I guess in that respect, like I would make a prediction that it is Littlefinger, and only because I think Littlefinger, that there's not a lot of money on him. I think people would think, oh yeah, that'd be kind of cool, but I think a lot of people are thinking Khaleesi. Some people are thinking Jon, particularly with the revelation that he is a Targaryen. But I mean, I could, there could be someone else somehow. I don't know who it would be. Hell, it might in some weird scenario. Maybe it could be Tyrion, or maybe Tyrion could die. I've heard that like Tyrion might make it towards the end, but that he's like one of the 3 heads of the dragon. Like that's one of the theories that I've heard. Yeah. That it's like Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion could be revealed as like. Always the thought of why Tyrion's dad hated him is because he was a dwarf. And while I'm sure that plays a role, there has been a theory for a long time, book and series, that Tyrion is actually a Targaryen and that his dad hates him because like Mother Targaryen had been raped and that he was like the child of that union. I actually think someone in the chat mentioned that too. So I don't know. Maybe it's tough. I want to say Littlefinger because I don't want to be wishy-washy. I want to put my name down on something, but that's what I would think happens. To me, the big question is how does the war between the White Walkers and like humanity resolve? Because it's always been like George R.R. Martin has always resisted the idea of like good versus evil, and that's very much how this conflict is being presented. Except that last season we kind of got the notion that the White Walkers were sort of created not by accident, but they were created with a purpose, and they just kind of got out of control.
Oh, sorry, I gotta mute myself.
What's going on?
I wonder if maybe somehow that conflict gets resolved in some sort of peaceful way. Or some way we wouldn't expect. To me, that's the big question.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like the way that they're building it is that they're going to get the White, bring it to Westeros, and say, this is the threat. It's not a bedtime story. It's for real, and they're coming to kill us all. And that might unify them to some degree. However, I almost think Cersei is crazy enough to where she might go, well, okay, well, let me, could Cersei want to
ally herself with the White
Walkers?
Holy shit.
If you remember,
if that happens, that would be amazing, by the way.
If you remember in one of the teasers for season 7, like Cersei, when they show Cersei, she turns blue and she breathes the fog. So I thought that was kind of, people foreshadowed that, well, maybe she will turn in, maybe she'll be the queen of the night, or the night's queen or something before it's all said and done.
I thought that was just kind of like a cute marketing thing, but I didn't think to take it literally. That's interesting.
She will ally herself with this other Greyjoy guy, but I don't see him sticking around very long, to be honest. I actually think she is crazy enough to look at the White Walkers and be like, "That's the real power."
Yeah.
And maybe that is what will eventually lead to Jaime killing her.
Oh wow, that's a good theory.
So.
That is a heck of a theory. Not one I considered.
Strange that we haven't really mentioned Daenerys at all, and that really seems to be the face of the show.
but I think
Show favors her, I would say.
Yeah, it almost seems too obvious. She's too powerful. She's like Eric was saying. She's got all these armies behind her. She's got dragons. She's got a fleet. She seems unstoppable. So it's just too obvious. I think that she would just go in there and run over everybody and take the throne.
Well,
if anything, like I foresee her being somebody her like maybe the throne is within her grasp and she's like maybe it's not maybe there's more for me out there, maybe it's not all that I thought it would be. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll destroy the throne and just be like, okay, let's start over.
Or maybe if there's some sort of moment of democracy in some form. I kind of feel like Daenerys' whole story has been wrapped up with this idea of like changing the way things work. Like she has that whole speech that was like season 4 or 5 where it's like, break the wheel. The ultimate way to break the wheel would be you don't have the royalty like that anymore. You have something else. I don't know whether the show would be willing to go there, but if we're looking for kind of theories about what would be unexpected, I think that would be unexpected. I don't know, that whole idea has never really been thought of before. It's always just been well, there's the royalty and the people, and that's just kind of how it is. But she's always had this kind of undercurrent of changing things and freedom, and even, and also too the fact that the show and the book again, it's following the books. Women characters who started out so subjugated, so underclass, have risen to be some of the most powerful figures in the story. Daenerys, Brienne, Arya, Sansa. Gosh, I'm trying to I mean, even Missandei. I know she kind of reports into Daenerys, but again, she was just sort of a plain old slave, and now she's one of the chief advisors to the Queen of Dragons. Like, I sort of feel like there's something there too, that it's really like about reshaping the world. So everyone wants to talk about the dragons and the White Walkers, and that I wonder if maybe that might not be where things are going to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't see us getting any kind of like resolution as far as so and so is going to sit on the throne, everyone else is dead. I think it's probably just going to be a shit show here out because White Walkers are coming in and everybody else is going to be fighting. So we'll get some really cool dragon battles, hopefully.
Oh man, I'm looking so much forward to that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's good that we're actually having this conversation, that we don't know where it's going to go. That a show that's this, going into its 7th season is just as captivating and compelling as it's ever been, maybe more so, because we know we're getting toward the end and we don't know how it's going to turn out. We kind of think we do, but that seems too obvious. And I don't think the showrunners will take it in the obvious direction. And I don't think George R.R. Martin would take it in that direction either. So,
let's get to the real question here. Do you guys think Grey Worm has he been completely castrated down there or what?
He's going to find a way, man. I'm telling you, he's going to find a way to work it. That was in the trailer too.
He's been given that evil eye.
Yeah. Take a bite out of Missandei's ass. I'm telling you, that's what's coming.
I don't blame him either.
A couple of people mentioned Qyburn in the chat, and I like him as a character too. He's an interesting character. We did anybody mention Viserys, the eunuch? He's another one of the
Varys. Yeah,
Varys. I'm sorry. What did I say? Viserys. He very much like Littlefinger. He's playing the long con.
That's actually the other thing I'm looking forward to. There used to be so many great Varys and Littlefinger scenes. Mm-hmm. We got to get at least one more before the show ends. Those two guys playing off one each other was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of those guys are king of everything.
Right.
Just because they've been controlling the board, for the most part.
They can, I mean, they kind of have. That's true. That's true. It just I don't know. It just seems, even the whole Azor Ahai thing, it just seems too obvious. I mean, that it would be Jon's. It's. I mean, we've known. I mean, the R plus L equals J theory has been around forever. So I mean, we know that that's true. He died. He was resurrected. So I mean, I don't know. There's certain things that just seem too obvious at this point that you're almost expecting a curveball. So.
Maybe the ultimate curveball is they're going to give us what we would expect. It's like they're like, it's like, well, no, it's not a double agent, it's a triple agent. No, it's a quadruple agent. It's like, no, we will give you what you expect, but nobody expects them to do that.
Yeah. Well, and you know,
created a knot.
And I mean, how many episodes have we got left? There's how many episodes in season 7?
There's 7. There are 13 episodes remaining. 7 episodes in season 7 and 6 episodes in season 8.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's it.
The final season.
Yeah, season 8 will be the final season. And like we were talking about on our show yesterday, the final season's episodes are slated to potentially be like feature length each one. Because this upcoming season apparently has the longest Game of Thrones episode ever. I think the finale is supposed to be like an hour and 2 minutes or an hour and 8 minutes or something like that. And they were thinking that next season, the final season would be like, you know, hour and a half or hour and 15-minute episodes each one.
Good. I'll bring it on.
Yeah,
it will be interesting.
Bring it. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting.
It'll be like maybe 2.5 years from now before we get any resolution.
Probably. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. The way things. Yeah. Season 8 premiere date will be July 25th, 2019. Probably. Yeah.
And will George R. R. Martin have even the 6th book out yet, to say nothing of the final book?
Is there any reason why it's taking him so long to produce these final books? He
types on our little internal chat. We were talking about it here, and I've heard that too. Like George R. R. Martin, he went on Conan one time, and he explained he doesn't use Microsoft Office. He uses some like old DOS-based word processing program that doesn't try to fix your spelling or add things. It's just very rudimentary thing. And, he even said he types like this, like a grandpa. And so on the one hand, he's just slow. On the other hand, it's like the guy's friggin' busy. Like he's always doing shit.
But
everything but writing.
He's a writer, though. That's what he does as his occupation, and he can't type. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Wasn't he at that dig where they dug up all the old Atari ET cartridges? He was somehow associated with. I think it was like some friend of his, and like he was in that documentary. It was weird. Like George R. R. Martin just pops up in an Atari ET documentary. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, go write. Well, here's the thing. Write it out by hand and give it to somebody who knows how to type. You know what I mean? And get these things done.
That's what you got to do to get it. I mean, dictate it. Shit. Somebody else can write it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, there's programs that'll do that for you. There's dictation programs out there.
That's true. And this guy's probably, I mean, how much money does this guy have? And he's using a DOS-based word processor? Come on, dude.
He does it on purpose. The way he said it to Conan, and he sounded like such an old fogey. He's like, I don't want it telling me that I actually want to put a comma there, because I don't want to put a comma there. I have the commas where I want them.
Oh, Jesus.
Shit like that. So
this dude sounds like he could be Cole's best friend.
Oh, come on. He's not here to defend himself.
Well, let's final thoughts. Game of Thrones. Final thoughts. Anything Game of Thrones related. Go for it.
Jay, I've dominated a lot of this. Why don't you start, sir?
I don't really know, man. It's we've. I mean, I feel like we've missed a lot of the big characters. I don't know. It's very interesting. I'm loving the arcs of all the characters, and looking forward to more curveballs coming my way. So should be very interesting.
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm sort of inspired about the new season because many of the actors have said, and the actor who plays Jaime Lannister, his name escapes me, but he
I can't.
basically he was kind of like, we had to get used to, there's really a new pace. Like at this point, it's really like, we are just barreling forward now. And I felt like last season was like that because, now that the training wheels were off, having kind of the books underpinning everything, I felt like the show had found a new pace where it was really just like big event, big event, big event. Every episode had cool things happening, which the earlier seasons had that too. Don't get me wrong, but there was definitely more contemplative episodes where it was really just people walking from place to place and just more cutting dialogue than major mythological events. So I'm excited about that, about the pace, to see what that means exactly, and just, the fact that last season ended with Daenerys finally on the damn ships to come to Westeros, like I just want to know what happens there. Like that's really cool. We've waited. You got to think for even the people who like were book readers that started reading these things in like, what was it, 1992 or whenever he first came out the first book. There's people that have been waiting 20 plus years to find out what's going to happen when Daenerys, lands in Westeros. And in just 3 days we're going to know. I just think that's cool.
Yeah.
You're going to get resolution one way or another. It's going to be in the TV show, not the books, because
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any way we could have summed up, 6 seasons of the show in just a couple of hours. There's so much there. There's so much material. There's so many characters. There's such a rich history. There's just so much to, this series. And
Hodor. We haven't talked about Hodor.
Oh, Hodor.
That was one of the most touching moments in television history, man.
That was a good one.
Good gosh.
That was good.
Got me a little misty-eyed, if I'm being honest about it.
Absolutely did.
Well, did you see that they had taken all these season 7 promo pictures with all the characters who are supposedly going to be in season 7, and one of the characters that they photographed was Hodor.
Really? So
is Hodor going to be a white? Are we going to see Hodor in some flashbacks? What's going to happen with Hodor?
That'd be cool if he was a white.
And how sort of heart-wrenching would that be if he did turn out to be a white? And what if he was a white that Bran warged into to fight the Night King? You know what I mean? That's a thought, just a thought. But
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, so he was part of the promotional photographs. I thought that was weird, since he is by all means dead. You know what I mean? So yeah. Cole, we were giving our final thoughts on the series, where we think the series is going to end, how we think it's all going to end. Go ahead, give us some final thoughts on where you think the show will end.
I mean, because of what they've had to do after about halfway through season 4, and how they've run out of material and started doing their own stuff, there's no way in hell I could really predict how I think it's going to end. But I think most people, when they predict it, what they mean by that is they want to be like, who's going to be on the Iron Throne at the end, who is still standing. Again, I don't know, but part of me, like, what I kind of would like to see, and I don't know if it'll be the book or show, is like, I don't really believe that there should be anybody on the Iron Throne. And it seems to me that the whole concept of what the Targaryens did back 300 years ago was like ruling the 7 kingdoms as one, is not feasible and not workable. So I see it as like, no more ruling the 7 kingdoms. The 7 kingdoms go back to being 7 completely independent kingdoms with their own kings, and there's no fucking Iron Throne. It's kind of how I think it would happen. And so that way we get multiple characters possibly on different thrones, and not everybody has to be like dead at the end of it. The thing that worries me the most is the stuff from the north. Like, I don't know how they're supposed to deal with all that. The White Walkers and everything coming down. Like, that's been ever since the very first scene of the first book, or the first show. Like, that's been the menace. Like, it's coming. It's slow as hell, but it's coming, and there's like not really any real way to stop it. Okay, there's a few little ways. And a lot of people have speculated, well, you got the 2 forces, them and the dragons. I'm like, it's only a couple dragons. Like, are they going to fight against each other? I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know. Part of me thinks that like maybe the North will just become like the new wall. They'll put up a new wall, and it will wall off the North. Period. And you know, the North will expand. The humans will lose the North, is how I see it, and the other kingdoms will go back to being autonomous and not having somebody on the Iron Throne. I don't know if it's going to come down to like somebody like having to decide it, or just coming to a point where there's all these armies pointed at each other and it's the only thing to do. But I don't know. Again, it's storytelling. You can do anything you want. But I think I would be kind of unsatisfied by them just like having Daenerys or somebody show up and be like, boom, Iron Throne, problem solved. Because the whole thing they highlight, and even Robert says it in the first season. Robert goes, I've got 7 kingdoms to run. Not 1, 7. It's like impossible. And part of me feels that way. Yes, it's impossible what they're trying to do. It's like the Targaryens sort of held it together for a couple generations, but even they couldn't do it. Like, it's sort of how I feel. So I feel like it's not going to end with any one big winner on the Iron Throne. I think we're just going to see, obviously, some more characters are going to die, and some other characters are going to maybe sit on some thrones. But I don't think there's going to be an Iron Throne. Here you are, ruler of the 7 kingdoms, ruler of all Westeros. I don't think that's happening. I think there's going to be some huge losses, and I think the biggest loss is going to be the North. I think the North is gone.
What if in season 7 we hear, like, we've seen how the White Walkers were created. They were created as a means to protect the children of the forest from the first men and yada yada yada. And,
sure.
But we really don't know, why are they, they're just evil for evil's sake. Maybe there's some other story going on there. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll hear the Night King speak and explain to Bran, what their objective is.
Bran, my name's Carl. This whole thing's been blown out of proportion.
Or down
a notch. Would you like some tea?
or maybe they just go
iced tea.
Or maybe they just go, okay, well, there's, I don't know. It just seems like the White Walkers are evil to be evil. We've discussed how all the characters in the show, they have their evil moments, but they have their, they're not pure evil. They're not pure good. You know what I mean? Jaime Lannister, for instance.
Right.
So the only thing we've seen the White Walkers in through the filter of is just pure evil. They're just bad. We don't understand why they're bad. They just want to kill everybody and take over everything. And that's just. I
never really thought of them as like thinking that much. I always thought of them more as a force. But I know that even in the show though, like as far as I've still seen them do some weird stuff. Like there's a scene possibly somewhere in season 5 where it actually shows them take a baby back, and they're all like, "Oh." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what is that? Like,
well, he turns it into a White Walker. Like he touches it and actually gives him blue eyes versus.
Which I mean makes sense because that's sort of what you suspect all along, right? You suspect that when you hear about like Craster giving up the boys, and just for the sake of it, because again, I don't want to come across as a show hater. Another thing I'll highlight that I think was really done well in the show, better than the book, was the whole reveal about how Craster does that. They have it really cool. They have it like Jon, follows him out and sees it, and then Craster knocks him out, and then that's how the episode ends and takes him back. And there's no drama to it all in the book. In the book, they're just walking around Craster's property and they're talking, and he's talking to Mormont. He's just like, some of the guys are saying that like he sacrifices his sons, and Mormont's like, yeah, he does. So
yep, you got it.
So it's actually done a lot better in that and stuff. So yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying maybe there's.
And didn't you earlier say something about, again, this is one of the things that I felt really smart because I thought, oh, maybe this is possible. And I guess they confirmed on the show. Is like, I thought, is that what happened to Benjen Stark? Is he cold hands? You said he is?
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought he was cut out of the show because where he was supposed to show up, he wasn't there. Like, he didn't help Sam. He didn't. So I just figured they cut him out of the show. So
well, there was
find out he does show up.
You were talking about like early drafts of George R. R. Martin's books. There's a copy of it's not a copy. It's like the original, like just rough manuscript of one of the books. Yep. And in the margins where there's like a cold hands part, the editor had wrote a note to George R. R. Martin, "Is this Benjen?" And his reply was no.
Oh, wow.
But in the show, Benjen is cold hands. So
yeah, I mean, and it's not, and that seems right. It's not like I was so smart or anybody so smart for figuring it out because it's like Benjen's been gone for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. We don't know where he is. Then Cold Hand shows up, and the one thing we know about him is that he must have at least at one point been a ranger. So you're just like, because he's got like the black on, you're like, oh well, that would make sense. He would help Bran. Bran's his family and stuff. But I don't know. I felt really smart about the whole Jon thing. Even though, again, by the time I'd come to the conclusion, I'm sure thousands of people had. But now I'm a little disappointed that it's out there on the show, to tell you the truth. Like, what impact is it going to have in the books now? Or does that just mean it's a fake and he's going to blindside us as something completely different? And then I'll feel really stupid because I was like, that wasn't my theory.
Well, I mean, we just talked about how some things are like, it seems way too obvious certain things are going to happen, and maybe they'll throw a curve at us here and there. We don't know. But my whole point with the White Walkers thing is, maybe there'll be every character in the movie, or every character in the show is complex. Why can't the Night's King be complex too? We've already seen that he was once a man. He was unwillingly turned into, what became the Night King, and maybe him and Bran will have some sort of interaction where Bran gleans a deeper understanding of him and what he wants.
Yeah. Show or book, Bran better have a massive payoff, because he's like the character that they most hammer us. They hammer us over the head with how special he is in the show and in the book. They just smash us over the head that Bran is like super important. So he better do something amazing.
Yeah.
He better get himself a wheelchair. He lost Hodor.
Yeah, what the hell was that? Again, I have no idea if they'll do this in the book, but Hodor means hold the door? What? Oh, that's
odd. Hold on. You have to see it, Cole, because while you were gone, we were talking about it. It's actually a really striking scene. It's actually quite powerful.
Yeah, I've seen the scene, and I've seen it in multiple languages where they had to change the words to make it make sense. Because that's one thing. This is a show that is broadcast in many different languages. And Hodor, meaning hold the door, works great for English speakers. But for the other people, they had to get really fucking creative. You should look it up. It's funny. You see them. They're yelling out really bizarre things just to try to make it have some sort of sound alike to Hodor in their language. And they're just like, how can we make this have something to do with a door? Like, it's really stupid. So, yeah, you can probably find that.
It's door in Portuguese.
Portuguese is one of them. I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah, it's like Portuguese, French, like Ukrainian.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's a whole bunch. There's like 7 or 8 different ones.
Well, one thing is for certain, and that is that nothing is for certain. So.
Well, I mean, if anybody can come back as an undead person that's not a White Walker, then yeah, anything's possible at this point. I mean, shit. I mean, if Jon Snow can die like 3 times in one episode and be all right, I mean,
if that's true,
anything's possible.
We'll see.
I very much hope it's not. But
yeah, that was probably like the first really big thing to like shatter people's worlds. If you'd read the books to their conclusion and then you got that, because it's just like, okay, the book ends with Jon getting stabbed a bunch of times. You're like, oh, geez. But you also think, well, it is possible. We've seen, but then the show, what's happened has happened. So again, if I read a Jon chapter in the 6th book eventually, it's just like, oh yeah, well, we all knew that was happening. But yeah, it seems interesting that they want to kill him multiple times, turn him into the new Beric Dondarrion. Yeah, let's just water Jon Snow down into some like idiot that can get killed and revived over and over again. That's
exactly
cool.
Sort of the specialness of that character if you do that.
Did you say he should wear eyeliner?
Or eyeliner.
Eyeliner makes all.
You are like,
special.
How do you hate Jon Snow? Come on.
I don't like Jon Snow, man. He's not, no.
I like Jon Snow. I like the actor who plays Jon Snow.
I know women want to bang him, but I'm not down
I don't know.
Maybe it's just jealousy. I think it's just jealousy. You're jealous of the actor.
Jealous of his lovely locks.
There you go.
I don't know. I think he brings a certain. I think he brings a certain something to the character.
You know nothing, Joe Stingray.
Jordan nailed that. That was perfect.
Well, guys,
you grit. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Let's close.
Well, I was going to go ahead and close things out since we've rambled a bit, but yeah, we've had an interesting discussion. I think of a very, very interesting show. Let me give some shout outs here to people who've tuned in here. Zombie Fun 100. Will Tolman finally bone Brienne this season? He wants to know. I doubt it. That'd be nice. She's saving herself for Jamie anyway, so it's not going to happen.
By the way, they revealed on that was not something the writers kind of intended. That was something organic that happened in the episode where the actor who plays Tormund kind of gave her a look and she gave him a look. and the director liked it, so they kept it in. And so just based off of just like a little kind of goofy decision made during shooting, this whole sort of shipping Brienne and Tormund kind of came out of that.
So Brienne's at the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems weird. Brienne would have this huge crush on Renly and then want to be with somebody like Tormund, who's like completely opposite of
well,
Renly.
She doesn't want to be with him. Yeah.
It's more him giving her a look like, hey, big lady, like I'm kind
of yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That's his character. His character is just like, oh, you have good hip. I mean, this is a guy that tells everybody he fucked a bear, so
right.
That's how he introduces himself. He's like husband of bears. It's just like, I went down. Like he tells this whole story about it. Like there's like the storm. He was really horny, and you remember this woman with big tits, and he's fucking her, and it's like, oh wait, it's actually a bear.
well, you know, Dusty Rhodes used to brag about wrestling a bear. So I mean,
is that the guitarist, right?
Which one's more
domineering? The pro wrestler. The pro wrestler.
I don't think of Randy Rhodes.
Oh yeah.
I was like, Ozzy's guy. Okay, that's weird.
Let's see. Jerpin, thanks for tuning in tonight, dude. We appreciate it. Let's see who else is here. Greg Stacy. Thank you for tuning in tonight, bud. Stone Gassman. Thank you. Let's see who else we got in here. Plateau TV. That sounds stupid. I don't know who that'd be. That sounds stupid. Chris Wynn for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. We appreciate it. Some Mark named Orc.
Some troll.
Chris Rogers, thanks for tuning in. Cameron was with us in the beginning. Joseph Purdue was with us in the beginning. So big thanks to them for tuning in as well. Let's see, where was the Blue Corner? Thanks for tuning in. So we're doing good. All right. Well, let's call it a night. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys, to talk about Game of Thrones. It was a lot of fun. And thanks to everybody who tuned in and watched along with us. And here's to season 7 of the show, which premieres this Sunday on HBO. So
I'll have to finish 5 and 6. I have to say, like the whole preview thing for 7 is like so it does pump you up. Like you're just seeing all this stuff. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
But and I will conclude by just saying, as somebody who's not a TV person, who's never have been and stuff like Game of Thrones is easily like, as far as adaptations go and stuff like that, the show that like kind of awakened me in a way, because it was just like, wow, like this is how you do this. Like it's so many things were so on point. Like for all of my little bitching things and stuff that I have about it and how things happen later, but I mean they do so many things right that like it was beyond like what I could have even expected. Like not just the casting. Like where the shooting locations and stuff like that, like the styles, like like the armor, like all that stuff is just so well done. Like it blew me away. Like I wish I could go back and tell you like how I felt like watching the first few episodes in 2010 or whenever it was, and how like there was no way I could have expected it to be as good as it was, and for them to hit right on the head so many things that I'd sort of imagined when I read the books, and here it was like right in front of me, almost exactly as I'd imagined it. Like so. I mean, super, super impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you guys have a great night and take care. We'll see you guys again soon. And peace.
Peace out.